So we'll go ahead and get started. House taxation is called to order. First, I'd like to call the committee's attention to sets of minutes for the February 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. Those will be put on the S drive for your reading, your late night reading enjoyment and entertainment, and we'll take a look at approving those tomorrow. Next item of business is requests for bill introductions. Are there any requests? Seeing none, we will move right on to our first hearing of the day, and that is House Bill 2474. And I'll turn to the reviser for an overview on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2474 would require the Director of Property Valuation to conduct a review or audit of the appraisal or an apportionment of the valuation of the property of any public utility whose total property value of property of such utility in the state decreases by more than 5% when compared to the prior year. Upon completion, the Director shall post the findings of the review or audit on the PVD's website and make such findings available for public inspection. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebers. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thanks again. I'll give this a try and give Kathleen a break today, but the Department of Revenue on the fiscal note estimates that House Bill 2474 would have no fiscal effect on the state and local property tax revenues. Does anybody have any questions on the fiscal note? If you do, I will not attempt to answer them, but seeing none, we'll go ahead and move into our proponent testimony and welcome first Representative Schwertfeger.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I brought this bill, House Bill 2474, to your House Taxation Committee. It's needed because my area has suffered a significant financial loss. It's only an addition of 7 lines into the current statute. What can I do to remedy my district's loss? Nothing so much. I mean, we'd like to, but it's hard to go back retroactive. We have a utility that moved its underground storage facility assets. How do you move underground storage facility assets? Did you move pipe? No. Don't know what they moved for sure, but we experienced a drop in valuation in my district of better than $20 million of valuations. And actual tax money, my district lost more than $1 million within a 2-year span. So that makes it difficult for stability in planning budgets for county commissioners, for school districts, when nothing has changed for the last couple decades significantly, and then all of a sudden in 2 years you have a very big change. And so the only reasonable thing we're asking is for a mechanism to stabilize things, that if a utility was to devalue themselves by more than 5% in 1 year, that they become triggered or automatically eligible for a audit or review of their records as to what they're doing. Basically, that's it. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative. What are you intending to see from this audit? Are you trying to hopefully understand, to your point when you opened up, what moved? This is underground storage. There weren't any pipelines that were moved. Is that what you're expecting to try to identify out of an audit?
Just shed light, open for discussion what is occurring. Just looking for more stability. We're kind of at a loss as to hoping that this doesn't continue in my area.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. I've talked to you some about this. I believe that underground gas storage was state assessed, right?
Yes.
So, and I believe you also contacted PVD to get an explanation
Yes.
of what machinery might have been involved in the asset moving from your county to another county. Is that right?
Correct.
And in that explanation, which I was privy to read, it went through the equation of how that property is, or that equipment is valued, and if it's moved, how it's valued when it's moved, and it went through a lot of explanation, but you did not get a list of equipment from that report, right?
I did not.
You didn't get particular items, what they were, or anything, right?
No, we did not.
So is it fair to say in this audit, you would expect the audit to come back and say, yeah, they moved this particular piece of machinery or this piece of machinery, or is that one thing you might expect?
That would be helpful if we could realize exactly what occurred.
What was moved?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on the same questioning, you yourself can't physically see where anything's moved,
Correct.
but yet they say they've moved 20 million.
Yes. And they made the comment that their books were out of order and that they had a new accountant and that a new accountant had a new software program and they were just correctly identifying and doing proper bookwork and they were updating their system.
And your county attorney, has it done anything for you or locally?
Just with this PVD report that we got is the main item that we're looking at, so.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to follow the paper on this one, so I see where you're coming from.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, you're asking if they decreased by 5%?
By more than 5%.
More than 5%. Okay, now this company that left, did it leave by 100%? Did it leave to take the whole show with them?
No, it did not, but it did a significant amount, more than 5%.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative Long for another question. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that report also said that whatever had left your area, the equipment that had left your area, had actually gone to another underground asset in another part of Kansas.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
And that area had increased their value because of that transfer.
So our loss was Ottawa's gain.
And so they did tell you that, I believe, in that report.
They did.
But they didn't list what that equipment was or what it did or?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, now seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Kelly Arneberger. My apologies. Please
No, I
continue.
just literally stuck my hand in the pocket and said, off. So, yeah. Committee members, thank you for taking the time to hear my thoughts or read them, some of the information I sent to you regarding House Bill 2474. Believe this is a good first step. I think some of the questions that were asked of Representative Schwartfigger are in response to the situation that took place specifically in Cunningham USD 332. And I shared with you one of our reports, one of our audits that we do for reporting, because we're currently in the process of, we've recently built a new high school, and we obviously have to do the financial reports, and it shows very clearly that specifically in one of our taxing units in Pratt County, taxing unit 61, the valuation dropped significantly over the past 2 years, more than in half, almost 70%. And it is due to the specific, to one specific company, because that's the only thing in that taxing unit, basically. There's not a lot of residents going on. We're in rural America. So having this opportunity to put something in place that would allow a local taxing unit, such as a school district, a county, or something, to ask questions and receive some answers would be beneficial. There's a lot of question about how we tax pressurized gas in a big hole, and that's for another. That's another conversation, but it's certainly one that we're interested in, because after all, I do recognize that all of you are keenly concerned about property tax, as there's going to be more conversation later in a different situation. And we have a company that has interest in an end consumer outside the state of Kansas that, through some very sophisticated software, through very intelligent accountants and lawyers, have figured out ways to benefit them and make the partnership between the citizens of the community that live where this entity, these assets reside. That partnership has dwindled, because in exchange for living in that community, the expectation is you use our ground, our resources, our land, and be a part of that the citizens should benefit through some resource. And that has declined significantly. And so when you have bills at the county level, the city level, the school level, somebody's going to pay those bills, and it ends up being the citizens that are living on that big pressurized hole of gas. So I do appreciate the fact that you're considering this. I do recognize that with the first run that there may be some questions, and there may be other iterations, and this may be a conversation that extends beyond today. Just wanted you to know that is appreciated, that you would consider. And I do want you to note, I think there were some numbers asked about, specifically in our community, this particular entity, our loss of revenue from 2022 and to 2025 in real numbers is about $600,000 in capital outlay, local option budget, bond, and interest. That the amount of revenue generated from that company has decreased that much. That's a significant amount for Western Kingman County, Eastern Pratt County citizens that choose to send their children to Cunningham USD 332. So thank you, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Arnberger. You mentioned that you'd built a new school. Was that a bond issue? And what has this loss in valuation done to the repayment schedule on that bond?
Well, it does not affect the payment schedule, because we still have to come up with the $759,000 a year to pay the bond. It does increase the mill rate when you go from an overall assessed valuation in a school district of $78 million to $55 million in 2 to 3 years. And so, as you can see from that information that I sent, you can see where that significant decline comes. There was a little bit. Actually, our utilities in Kingman County are up slightly, but we have Oklahoma Railroad. And so I think that the reason why this came to light is because when we have that one specific unit where that one specific plant sits, and to see that much valuation go away, you have to ask a question, why? And the first year, it's like, well, we weren't storing any gas, we're not moving any gas. Okay. Second year, well, we got a new Jeep, other individual retired, the new guys come in, we have a new auditing system, and that system's more accurate, and that's the way it is. Although there was an error that was found, and we did get a little positive correction. It was even worse before we started making calls. Then, asking about the portable equipment. Well, can you talk about specifically how several $1 million, what that might look like? Because if you drive Highway 54 between Pratt, the community, and Cunningham, the community, the plant sits on the southern side of Highway 54. Not a whole lot has changed in the last couple of years from the eyeballs, and that's where the patrons are like, we got a problem. Where did that go? Well, those might have been historical numbers. Well, what do you mean by historical numbers? Well, the old system, and that's how it was figured, and now that we have a more accurate GPS software, that reflects a more accurate reflection of where those assets currently reside. That's a hard pop to take in the nose when you're responsible for explaining to your citizens that your mill rate's going up on your school, and so then you have to make other adjustments, which we did. That's not my point. My point is that is something that's been around a long time, and there's always been that partnership between the community and that company, and now we feel like maybe we're no longer partners, but maybe just stewards and underpaid stewards.
Yeah, I did neglect to tell the committee, we did have a day during the interim, September 18th, where we discussed this extensively as well. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, you can go back and review the archived live stream. There was also documents that were presented to the interim committee on this issue that really got into the details of what happened here. But ultimately, this is, I think you mentioned it during the interim committee, a little bit of communication here would have went a long ways. And this bill appears like it's more about transparency. Would like to be able to see through an audit what exactly happened. Would that be I don't want to oversimplify it, but we're just looking for some transparency here.
May I share? Representative Long asked Representative Shortfigure about the communication process. We made the call to the Department of Revenue, then we made the call to the Corporation Commission, then we were sent to the feds because nobody really knew who had anything to do with this. Thankfully, the young man from the company was willing to take my call, and we had a lot of good conversations. We met in Wichita, actually at one of their conferences in utilities and explaining the process, but there was it still comes down to, if we're saying that we have this much equipment in 23, and now this is the new number, what recourse do we have to ask harder questions about that and maybe say, that's not quite right? And we're asking for that piece. And it may not have to come from statute, it could be self-correcting, because there may be some conversation about, well, maybe we could do better on our end. But entities that spend or share money they may be a little reluctant just to do it out of the goodness of their heart. But if there's some light brought to it, then maybe we could have a conversation. Maybe there could be some self-correction. It may not require a statute, but only if you hear from us first.
Committee, are there any further questions? Representative Smith?
I really do. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Mr. Chair. How long have you been in your new high school?
We are in our second full year.
Ooh. Would you have built it if you knew this was going to happen?
There's an interesting story. As you can tell, I have got a little bit of age on me, and I was ready to maybe, not do what I do anymore. And then the superintendent that had helped in the process of getting the bond passed had a really great opportunity at the end of May. That's a really hard time for a small school district to find a permanent soup. So you're looking at a 3-year interim going into 4. And so I got in on the back end. So I was in on the construction side of it. But I do believe, after talking to many patrons, that one of the big selling points is that we are in a good position because we have that asset as part of our district, and so the burden on taxpayers will be limited. Literally, our mill rate I believe 13, for a $13 million school. There are other districts that cannot pass bonds because they can't pull off that kind of money for that kind of mill rate. That's truth. And if you fly overhead, we're not in a horrible position, but in this case, every single bit of decrease from that company goes right on the shoulders of the people that, made good use out of a school for 106 years until finally it was no longer tenable.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions, committee?
Once again,
Seeing
thank
none.
you.
Yes, thank you for your testimony. That's all that I show appearing before the committee as a proponent. Is there anyone else wishing to appear as a proponent on House Bill 2474? Seeing none, we do have written only opponent testimony. It looks like from Darren Miller with AT&T. Is there anyone wishing to appear before the committee as an opponent? Any neutral? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2474. Again, committee, if you want to dive into that issue a little bit more, go check out the interim committee on September 18th for a rather in-depth discussion on that. So we'll now open up our next hearing on Senate Concurrent Resolution 1616, and I'll turn to the reviser for an overview on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill Concurrent Resolution 1616 would cap the final taxable assessed value of real property classified in any subclass and also tangible personal property classified as mobile homes and used for residential purposes at no more than 3% or a lesser amount provided by law, except when the property includes new construction or improvements which have been made to the property, the class or subclass of the property changes, the property becomes disqualified, the property is first listed for taxation or first listed as escaped or omitted property, or an error is corrected, or the legal description of the land, lot, or parcel changes. Pursuant to this SCR, the assessed value limitations shall remain in place whenever title to the property transfers unless otherwise set forth under law. And additionally, for tax year 2027, which is when essentially would go into effect, the final taxable assessed value for the property shall not increase by more than 3% or less as provided by law as compared to tax year 2022, unless an otherwise exception applies. Pursuant to the SCR, the legislator may define new construction or improvements by law, except that improvements made to the property shall not include normal repair or maintenance of existing structures, building components, or fixtures on the property. Additionally, the legislator may also enact other legislation to administer the provisions of the assessed value limitation. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Committee, are there any questions? Is the main difference on this, I think the last time we saw this, we had what might be referred to as portability, where that would transfer. It looks like under this resolution, if a new buyer comes in, the cap stays with the property, so the new buyer would not be subject to the full fair market value.
That would definitely be one, I believe, a new component. I believe they also, I'm not sure the prior version had kind of the look back to the prior tax year. Maybe it did. I just can't recall. Essentially, this goes, when it goes into effect the first year, you look back to 2022, which is what it's based off of for the first year increase calculation.
Okay. Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Adam. We'll now open up our proponent. Well, I guess we do have a fiscal note we can review right quick. Kathleen, do you want to? It's not an official fiscal note. It's a fiscal impact, but I didn't know if you wanted to address that, or do you want me to have research?
I can tell you the numbers.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the Division of Budget does not prepare fiscal notes on concurrent resolutions, so there is not an official fiscal note from the Division of Budget. The Department of Revenue did estimate there would be a negative impact to the State School District Finance Fund of $218.6 million in fiscal year 2028, $244.2 million in fiscal year 29, and $271.6 million in fiscal year 2030.
Thank you, Kathleen. And if I understand it correctly, that's because of basically the statewide 20 mills. That's all attributed to that. And by rolling back valuations, it accounts for a loss in the tax base because of the 20 mills.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions on not the fiscal note, but the fiscal impact? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Kathleen. We'll now turn to our proponents and welcome first to committee, Dave Trobert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Dave Trobert, CEO of Kansas Policy Institute. We're pleased to be here in support of SCR 1616. And it's not just us who support it. The vast majority of your constituents support it. In my testimony, I have a statewide public opinion poll we published. This was done in September, and it showed 75% statewide want a limit on the increase in taxable assessed values, only 13% opposed. That's a net favorability of 62%. That's pretty remarkable. And it's across the board. It's whether you look at geography, you look at, Western Kansas, it's the highest, 80%. The lowest geographically is 69% preference. So this is truly one of those 80-20 issues with taxpayers. We think part of the reason that this has seen such a tremendous increase in support for an assessment limit is on this chart, which is in your testimony. The blue line here shows the average tax increase on residential property across the state of Kansas. And it was 26% through 2024 compared to 2021. We think based on the data we've gotten so far from PVD that it's probably around 32% now over a 4-year period. The red line, unfortunately, is per capita inflation adjusted income in Kansas. It's down about 3%. So that's the picture of an enormous affordability challenge. Also in your testimony, there's a table showing by county how much the assessed values on residential property increased over the previous 4 years. The state average is 40, and of course there's some above and some below. I'd also like to draw your attention to tables 1 and 2 that's in my testimony. We wanted to understand, initially I was skeptical about the assessment limit, and I didn't become a supporter of it until I had done some pretty extensive research. We went back 20 years and said, what if it had been in place? And what impact would that have? And we allowed mill rates to increase 5 times as fast as they actually increased over that period. What we see in Table 1 is what actually took place. That's just PVD data. Table 2 is the simulation of what would have taken place if there had been a 3% cap. And so you can see, for example, ag is a huge beneficiary of this. Actual assessed value was $2.4 billion in 2024. Under the assessment limit, it would have been about half, $1.2 billion. Tables 3 and 4 look at the tax implications of those in Table 1 and 2. You have the actual taxes paid by category in Table 1, and then Table 3. In Table 4, we use the limited assessed values from Table 2 and increase the mill rates. And what we see here is that still ag saved $1.3 billion, or would have, over that 20-year period. Commercial and residential would have saved $1.7 billion. And by the way, this would still have allowed about a 4% property tax increase overall for the state. So it's not like anybody's being starved there. There's also, I'm not going to go through the numbers, but the table, the testimony rather, has a 10-year future. We did the same thing, doing the what ifs. The next thing I want to mention is these two charts that's in your testimony. I mean, this is a picture. This is ag land. What it shows, the blue line, that's the roller coaster. We all know that's what happens with ag values because it's on use. You'll have some years declining. We happen to be in a declining period right now. But then there was this enormous spike. This peak was 17% in 2014, and with double-digit increases on either side. The assessment limit acts like a glacier. It just scrapes off those increases at 3% each year. The orange part is our best guess at trying to be conservative on what the future might look like. We had to do that to do the tax, and it wasn't bad. We assumed a 5% decline in 25. It turned out to be, I think, about 8.5% decline. Finally, I'd like to direct your attention to a table in the testimony that deals with Seward County. It's an example of why we believe we need both a revenue limit that the House has been working on and this assessment limit. This is a home appraised at $250,000 in the city of Liberal. In 2024, the city, the county, the school district, and the community college all held their tax increase to about 1%. I mean, they did a great job. But if a home that had a 15% increase in assessed value would still get a 13% tax increase, even though they had significantly reduced their mill rates to help mitigate the increase. That's what this assessment limit is really about to me. It's an insurance policy for the individual property owner that your property won't go up more than 3% a year under this limit. And so it's, I understand there's a lot of concerns and very legitimate questions. I mean, this would be a significant change. Fortunately, we know that assessment limits have been around for perhaps decades in many states. And I know there's been a lot of questions about this might and this might, but it's interesting that nobody yet has brought in, I could be proven wrong later today, but nobody yet has brought in a concern that said, this is what happened in this state for this reason. All we've been hearing is, well, what if? And those are good questions to ask, and that's partly why we did that extensive research. So we have people who are literally being taxed out of their homes right now, and small businesses, the same thing. So we really encourage you to report this out favorably, and I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, committee. I think we'll do kind of block questions at the end. We'll take testimony from each one just to make sure we get through everyone, all right? We can tend to get into the weeds with our questions sometimes, which is a good thing. But next, I'd like to welcome Eric Estes. Welcome to committee.
Chairman, thank you. Members of the committee, thank you. If you know my late great Bud Estes, he would be upset that I'm not wearing a tie. It's choking me. And I want to say thanks too for our 190th overseas. My daughter's a Coyote. So thank you, everyone. My name is Eric Estes. I'm here to represent KDDA, Kansas Deer Dealers Association. It's a group of all of us John Deere dealership owners across 105 counties. So we collectively designed this to help grow and help our ag, help all of our farms. And whether that's in tort reform, whether that's in tax, whether that's in water rights, however we can help as dealers, we want to preserve our farms. And so our farms were feeling like their voices weren't being heard. And so we're pleased to be able to come to you with any of our concerns and or comments, questions. Also, Q-Line Foods is a retail company of ours, restaurant operations also from Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, so primarily Qdoba, but just wanted to kind of frame this on 1616 as to why we are absolutely in favor of this, as well as 2745, the revenue limit. I do believe, and we all believe, that we need both. We need to be able to capture both sides of that. So what we've done is on KDDA, you have examples in my testimony of our websites from every dealer. And on those examples, we've had 14,000 clients, forms, that have clicked on that and have sent a representative an email. And that's pretty impressive. 14,000 forms said, hey, we have a really, really big problem. And that's not just pole barns being taxed for the first times ever, which we're seeing that. Me being on the finance side, I see farms and we help, construct and reorganize those. And I'm seeing property taxes soar, not just in their personal homes, in residence, in commercial buildings, but in their outbuildings and their machine sheds. Pole barns that just have hay in them, and they're now paying $8,000 a year for. And so we know that it's time that we need to address this. Using some of Mr. Trebert's information, $777 million in savings over the next 10 years if 1616 were to pass on its face as it is right now, which that's impressive to us. The 2022 rollback is extremely impressive. I think that that's so necessary. We're at the ceiling today. And as of yesterday and the day before, new assessments came out, and I know in many counties that we're in, another 10% here and there. So I know that we're absolutely at the ceiling. So 2022, we're absolutely a proponent of, and I do believe that that's necessary. On the Qdoba side, I would like to say that we look at restaurants in general as I'm going to build in Hutchinson, Kansas, or Liberal, Kansas, or wherever we're going to go, Topeka, Kansas. And so what I've done is I've referenced it so everyone can kind of get an idea of it, not just in dollars, but we're going to do this in burritos. So you can kind of see the difference of me in my Austin, Texas store. So you have an Austin, Texas store where the square footage is very similar, the building is very similar, they're the same age as the one in Reno County and Hutchinson, Kansas. So in reference, I'm paying $17,000 a year for one, I'm paying $46,000 a year in Reno County for the other one. For me to make up the difference for my colleagues that now own those stores in Oklahoma and Texas, that would mean that I'm going to have to sell 14,500 more burritos out of every single restaurant just to level the playing field. That's just to give you an example of an unfair condition of a competitive edge. 1616 would actually level that. 1616, along with the revenue bill that you're working on, would absolutely help us in the restaurant business, and not only that, in the commercial business and real estate business. And so I look for things like that, like what are great examples of what makes it great for me to build in Kansas versus another state? Is there a competitive edge in another state versus here? And so I thought, that's kind of putting it mildly, but in my 10 restaurants, that means I'm selling 145,000 burritos. So I would call Food Network and we'd have Man versus Food right here in the lobby, and that would go to the ceiling. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the stark differences that we're seeing and that we are a proponent of this. It's definitely necessary. Not just for homeowners, because I know that we are taxing some of our elderly out of their homes. I personally have several properties where the tax monthly is more than the rent. And so, it didn't used to be that way. It wasn't that way in 2019. It wasn't that way in 2018. But today it is there. And so not just for our commercial residents and our farms and our commercial businesses, our boutique stores, our flower shops. I'm just kind of standing here for all of us and a proponent and saying, let's just pass this 1616 annual revenue bill, which we're strongly a proponent of. So thanks, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Estes. We'll take questions at the end, and we'll call you up. I've got one for you. So next, I'd like to welcome Linnell Griffith.
Welcome to committee. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify. My name is Linnell Griffith, and I'm from Topeka, and currently I'm serving as the chairwoman for the Shawnee County Republican Party. And I say that in context because before our Topeka revenue neutral rate hearing, I got together with the chairman of the Shawnee County Democrats and the 2nd District Libertarian chair to speak with an independent city council member. We were all saying, let's not go beyond revenue neutral. Let's vote no. And that city council person did vote no. Of course, they raised our taxes because that's what they do. We pack the room every time. But anyway, this is across the board, and you know that. I won't spend my time telling you about the problems of ever-increasing property taxes or how everybody needs relief. But rather, I want to speak about an analogy in this treacherous road of ever-increasing property taxes, seemingly arbitrary, ever-increasing. We, fortunately, have had a warning sign about this treacherous road, and that has been the revenue neutral rate hearings. They've gotten me involved. They've been very telling. Like I say, in Shawnee County and Topeka, we pretty much pack the room. That's been a warning sign for this treacherous road of ever-increasing property taxes. But we need 2 guardrails about this. And let me just say, about 5 years after Kansas became a state, it allowed the local taxing authorities to impose a property taxes on its citizens. So I think it's very appropriate that that same legislature put some guardrails up. Keep that warning sign up of the revenue neutral rate hearings, but also put up some guardrails. And this Senate Concurrent Resolution 1616 about the assessment cap is absolutely necessary. It's also necessary to have, as you are working on, some sort of revenue limits, which will benefit everybody. But let me just offer this. If you have some sort of revenue limits, which our people need, but you don't have some sort of assessment cap, you're not respecting the people just wanting to stay in their homes, the people wanting to stay in their communities, especially if the population declines. Because then you have this big tax bill that is divided by fewer people. Of course, you know, you can change up the mill rate, but we need more transparency. And if we put this cap on assessed values, then the mill rate's going to become more apparent because it's going to have to change more drastically to get what they need. So I'm very much in support of 1616 to put this assessment cap on it, to honor the people and that want to stay in their homes, especially with populations declining. We don't want to tax them out. We have all sorts of fancy things to bring people into our communities. Let's honor them and let them stay in their homes and their communities by giving this assessment cap. And it's not an appraisal cap, so I don't see how it would mess with the market too much. And as far as I've heard it may create somewhat of a bubble in ag in ranch land, and I respect that opinion. I have ranch land and I come from a ranching family, and I say, you know what? People are being taxed out of their homes. This is a bigger issue. We got to get this assessment cap going. And let's get some of those fine farmers and ranchers, Kansas Livestock Association folks, to get into local office and just stop the local property tax increases right then and there, and we can all win. I mean, we need to do this for Kansas to bring people into our state and not shove them out of our communities. And we can do this. We can come together and do this. And you know what? If the cities and counties are saying, we need help here, we can't stretch our budgets that much. Well, individuals are stretching their budgets that much in these difficult economic times. So maybe the cities and counties can come to you for some proposals of, hey, don't mandate so many programs for us. The thing is, we need to protect our citizens. We need to make it so that they can stay in their homes and just have their pursuit of happiness. We can do that. We're Kansans, and we can come together and do this. Again, it's all the affiliations. It's rural, it's city. We can get this done, and I strongly support Senate Concurrent Resolution 1616 and hope you do as well. At the appropriate time, I'd be delighted to stand for questions.
Thank you for your testimony. That's everyone that I show appearing as a proponent. Is there anyone else I might have missed that would like to appear as a proponent? If not, we do have written proponent testimony by Ellen Riedel, Randy Stuckey, and Maddie Boughton, City of Basehor. Committee will now open it up for questions of the proponents. If you have a question, Representative Smith, and if you want to just open it up general, if we have somebody, let them know who you'd like to answer the question.
Mr. Trolbert, if I could have you please. I talked to a friend last night in Pittsburgh, and he bought a house a year ago on 6 acres, so I know the 6 acres is making a difference. But when he bought it, he paid $50,000. And yesterday, the appraised value came out at $100,000. What I was wondering, what's the difference between assessed value and appraised value?
Okay, so I'll make the math easy for me. So the appraised value was $100,000. The Constitution applies an assessment ratio of 11.5% on residential property, so its assessed value would be $11,500. The ratios are different for commercial and ag and so forth, but that's the difference between appraised and taxable assessed.
Could you say that again?
Sure. The appraised value of a property is $100,000, let's say.
Right.
Therefore, its assessed value, it will pay taxes on $11,500. It's 11.5%. So a mill rate, then you would take the mill rate times 11.5, because 1 mill is $1 for each $1,000 of value.
Why would a county raise it 100% in 1 year? Any ideas?
Raise valuations?
Well, again, when he bought the house, maybe the appraised value was more than that, but he bought it for 50 and now it's 100,000.
When did he buy it?
A year ago.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of circumstances that go into that, but I don't know if there were any improvements, any additions to the property.
Well, he called the county and they said it was because of the 6 acres of land that's going with the house. So,
well, was the 6 acres part of the property when it was 50,000?
So I'm not sure, but
I mean, if he bought it all, then the 6 acres shouldn't make a difference, because if it was there, if that's what he bought, then the value should have been all together.
Yeah, that's what he bought.
But,
though. So,
okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Corbett.
This would be either for Mr. Estes or Mr. Talbert. I heard today that this bill would drastically be harmful for farmers and rural Kansas. And the thing that I don't understand, back in the 80s, when the farmers were being pinched pretty hard for taxes, we passed a constitutional amendment to save them, so it goes by production and not value. So you'd think that would save them a little bit, but with that in mind, how does this bill raise their taxes or hurt their land values, or however they want to say it? But I keep hearing that, but I don't know how it works.
Yeah, so this bill doesn't raise their taxes. Effectively, it's going to lower their taxes.
You might make sure you speak into the microphone so
I'm sorry.
everybody can hear
So
it.
this bill effectively will lower their taxes. It won't raise their taxes. When we were looking at the data that was presented earlier, we were asked that same question, and when I looked at our scope, if you look at on my testimony on the back, we've got a 10-year slide rather than taking a small capture of 2 years where, farmland can rise and fall in valuations, but over the course of time is where we've been really damaged on farm ground. And even as of late, most of the farms that I am working with today have all seen valuations increase on all parts of their farm. And so, and several I can tell you, like in Ford County, Pratt County, Reno County, they've never seen their taxes as high as they are as of today. So they're at the all-time high.
And this bill will help that.
It will help that. And they're a proponent of 1616, trying to get that under control. Yes, sir.
Representative, if I could add to that, there's table 3 and 4, I think, I would reference that because we had the same conversation on the Senate side. The KLA did, I've looked at their numbers where they looked, I think it was 2019 to 2024. That happened to be a period where ag values were declining each year. And so they, in that short period, they wouldn't have received any benefit from a 3% cap. Their benefit comes from avoiding the large increases, which happen quite frequently. They just happen to look in that 5-year period. And if you look at table 2, or table 4 rather, I keep getting my tables mixed up, our data shows something similar. The actual tax paid by ag in that period was declining because valuations were declining. Ours show a very small increase from like 2020 to 2021 to 2022 because we did allow, as I said, for mill rates to increase. But when you look back at the whole period, and I think that's where the real difference lies, we're looking at the entire cycle, and I think they're only happen to be looking at a short window where values were declining, so they wouldn't get any benefit during that time. However, if you look, and I'll just pick 2020, they paid $404 million collectively in property tax on ag land. Under this scenario, they'd be paying $253 million. Wow. So even though it went up instead of down, they're paying a lot less tax.
Thank you.
Dave, you might stay up here if you don't mind, and Eric, if you want to chime in on this too, I'll piggyback off of Representative Corbett's question. That's one of the concerns that I've had with this, with the fluctuation of ag land. Where it's at today is probably one of my biggest concerns, because as I look at my home county, Wallace County, our largest class of real estate of property is ag land. And over the last, I think 18 was the high, we've lost about 2/3 of our valuation, our tax base, because of the drop from the high point where ag land was at its highest point in the last 20 years versus now it's almost at one of the lowest points again. But this 3% cap will lock it in at that lowest rate. And I agree completely with your math that saves dollars. But my concern is when we lose that much valuation in one class of property, imagine if we had this applying to like our oil and gas property as well. It would lock it in at that lowest rate, so when oil prices went back up, when production went up, you wouldn't be able to capture that. And my concern is it's not everywhere across the state. Urban areas won't have this problem because they have such a vast diversity of their property. They have a lot more residential, a lot more commercial, but in these smaller rural areas, that's a lot of tax base that has been shifted now onto we have in Wallace County, we've got public utilities, we've got some pipelines and railroads that go through, but the close second to them is our residential property, and we have a little bit of commercial. We're a small rural county, but I worry about locking in that low rate for agriculture because that is a shift. When you lose that tax base in one class of property, it shifts it onto all the other classes of property. That's probably the biggest reason for some of our soaring property taxes in my county is we've had the counties, they were revenue neutral last year. They raised it this year. I'm not 100% sure where our schools have been, if they've stayed revenue neutral or not, but there hasn't been a large increase that I'm aware of in any of our city or county or school, townships, whatever. But just because of that extreme loss in our tax base from the ag land, that has now shifted over onto a lot of the residential property. And I'm just curious, what's your thoughts on that? What can we do for those rural communities to help capture that increase in ag land? I mean, that's the reason we have that rolling average, is to kind of smooth it out. It allows it to go back up. If we lock it in at that low rate, doesn't that kind of lock in that shift over onto residential property?
I'm looking at it from a taxpayer perspective, not the county's perspective. And so I probably have a different viewpoint on what they could do. But with that said, ag land has been in a declining cycle for, what, 3 or 4 years now? So you're providing services, and obviously you've got mill rates maybe higher on other people than you would like. But you go back and look at the times, because if you're in it sounds like Wallace County is in a little bit of a boom or bust. You're great when ag values are going up double digit, and oh my goodness, now they're down. One of the things you want to do is obviously resist the temptation to spend everything that comes in the boom years. You want to set a lot of that aside, build up some reserves for that to come down. But now we're at a level where they're providing services with the existing values. And so, yes, this would prohibit them from cashing in on the double-digit gains, but it would also prohibit the individual taxpayers from having their residential value go up a lot to maybe offset. To me, this is about the affordability for the taxpayer, and I understand that has some implications on city and county government, school districts, and so forth. They would have to manage their money a lot better, and they can. We know that from examining, comparing one group of school districts to another or counties to others. We know there are many opportunities where they could provide the same quality service at a little bit better price and not have to tax as much. So it's, we wouldn't be here if taxes hadn't gone up 2.5 times inflation plus population. And I don't mean this the wrong way, but I don't have quite as much sympathy for what led us here and try to protect that. We're really trying to help the people who are literally being taxed out of their homes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I wasn't asking that question from the perspective of the local government. I was asking it from the perspective of the residential landowner. When I got my tax statement last fall, my house went up, my ag buildings, my pole barn, things like that will go up, but my ag land dropped considerably. So it was a tax shift. My ultimate statement actually didn't change that much, because my loss in ag land, what I was paying on my ag land, was made up for by my home.
With the assessment limit, your tax bill would have gone down then, because your home wouldn't have gone up as much. And you would have, because I don't know what your home went up, but just looking at kind of the average for Wallace County, it's unfortunately one of the outliers, way above 50% over the last 4 years. So it's possible that the homeowner still benefits because they're going to get the benefit of the 3% limit.
Yeah, maybe I'm not asking the question.
You can certainly run the math to make it come out one way or the other. There's no question about that. And we've been decades of elected officials conditioning people to think about tax increases in terms of mill rates. No, we didn't raise your tax. See, our mill rate didn't change. Well, now that's going to come back to kind of haunt them, because if we pass this, they're going to have to start convincing people that they really do want to raise mill rates, and it's going to change the conversation. It's similar to the transparency pressure that revenue neutral has done. It has dramatically reduced the number of counties with high increases. You compare pre and post. You look at the number of counties that didn't raise taxes. It went from 21 counties pre-revenue neutral to 46 in the last 2 years. So there's been it's that transparency pressure. And there was one of the, I think it was a mayor yesterday in the Senate, testified that they really like the revenue neutral, because even if they can't stay at revenue neutral, it makes them think about, do we really need to do this? We can justify it, but do we really need to? And this type of an assessment limit, I think, would have that same kind of psychological impact that would encourage local governments to look a little closer at their budgets.
Committee, any further questions? Representative Howerton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand income tax. I do not understand property tax. So I'm going to ask some basic questions, and maybe you can help me wrap my brain around this. I have tried. I need a basic formula. What is property tax? How do you calculate that
So,
in Kansas?
so it's based on, it starts with the appraised value of property. And then you multiply that appraised value by a percentage, which in the case of residential is 11.5. There are some where the ratio is 25, some where it's 30, but we'll just stay with residential for right now. So you take appraised value times 11.5%, and that gets you to the assessed value of the property. And then a mill rate, I think it goes back to something in Latin, why they call it mill. It represents, 1 mill represents $1 of tax for each $1,000 of assessed value.
Okay, so where does the budget fit into this? The county budget?
The county
or the city
budget?
budget, or any budget? Where does the budget fit into this?
So the county, the city, whatever school district, they put their budget together and they decide how much they want to take in property tax. And so in the past, what's been done is, well, it still technically has to be done. You would divide the, you do the math to back into the mill rate to deliver that dollar amount of property tax. So it simply comes down to how much they choose to spend, and in a lot of cases, they could choose to spend less.
So that's the constant in this. The budget determines the mill rate, and so the assessed value, if we cap it, this is my rationale, and you kind of alluded to this. If you cap it, that doesn't really affect anything, because it's the mill rate that's determined by the budget as to how much we pay, correct?
Well, the budget is what they choose to spend.
Correct.
I mean, the budget isn't an inanimate object.
That we elected them to do that,
right.
and so, yeah.
But if you put I'll take you back to the example I gave in Seward County. That person had a 15% increase in their assessed value. And the cities and the counties didn't raise the mill rates. They actually reduced them a little bit. But that individual still got a 13% property tax increase. And I pretty much guarantee you they didn't get a 13% income increase that would help them pay that. If there was an assessment limit in place, their tax increase based on the mill rate charge would have been 1%. So the mills might have gone up a little bit more, but not to where they're going to get a 13% tax increase.
Okay. I guess to me, the budget is kind of the determining factor and kind of the constant, and that backs into all that. So I'm just trying to process that. And just to share with you and the committee, and I have a neighborhood chat, everybody got their property tax values on Monday, right, or assessed values on Monday. Mine went up. Everybody in the neighborhoods went up. We don't even have sewer in our little neighborhood, but we are being taxed like we are, so we're trying to appeal that. But I had a statement, and one of the neighbors said, can we do some sort of petition that could be taken around to neighbors to sign? This might make it easier for some people. And I think that's what resonates with me. And so I'm just trying to, weigh the two different plans and just process through this. So, yeah.
You don't have to weigh them, do both of them.
Okay, thank you.
Really, because one, the assessment limit that we're talking about here, this is what protects the individual taxpayer from having a big tax increase just because their valuation went up. They didn't collect that gain. It's an unrealized gain on paper, but they're having to pay tax on it. Whereas you also need then the revenue limit that prevents those mills from going up too much without that protest petition. You really need both. This isn't an either or, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is more on the residential side of things rather than the agricultural. So this bill focuses on an individual property application of the cap, we'll call it for purposes, right? So let's say that I have in my district, 3 different segments. One segment doesn't grow very fast, so it might have grown 3% during the year, the valuation, right? The next one, let's say it grows at 8, and the next one at 14, just the different natures of homes and neighborhoods. So under this bill, all of those would have been stopped at 3%, let's say, right? So when that local taxing entity, or the county, let's say the county comes in with their budget and they lay it on top and say, what's our assessed value? Then isn't it effectively just redistributing? So instead of that 12% increase house having a larger tax bill for this current year valuation increase, that gets shifted. More of it's borne by the lower end home. Follow? Because it's equated them all at the 3%. Fair?
That's assuming that they would just routinely raise the mill rate to deliver the property tax they want. But the transparency, I think we can look back at the really successful revenue neutral law you all passed through in 2021 to see how the transparency has suppressed the growth in tax rates. And so now they would have to go, and especially if you pass your protest petition, now they would have to turn around and say, instead of reducing your mill rates, we need to add another mill or two to it because, your values went down and we want to spend more. And in every single case, and by golly, you're from Johnson County, so you know what the government budgets are like there. They do not need to do that. They could do it, certainly, but they don't need to.
Right.
But I really do believe that the pressure of decades of saying we didn't raise your mill rate is going to help bring that pressure is going to be there. Now you're going to come back and try to convince them I've got to raise your mill rate a lot. That's going to suppress that. They're going to mitigate it. I would imagine they'd still raise it, but we don't think the psychological pressure and the transparency history indicates that they would just do whatever to keep, in your case, maybe an 8 or a 9% tax increase going.
Right, but whatever they do applies to all 3 of those properties I described equally, correct? So it's a residential rate, whether they raise the mill or they leave the mill the same. I'm just saying because of this cap and because of it being laid on top of those valuations and allocated based on those valuations, then effectively that lower end house is for the worse and the high end house is for the better because it's just redistributed those needed tax dollars that are being collected by the county more to that smaller valuation house than the larger. I know we're running long and I'm just being...
If a property or a neighborhood is consistently below 3%, then yes. What we see is it is consistently way above 3%.
But there's some of all.
We're looking at 40% over the last 4 years. So yes, it is entirely possible that somebody could end up paying a little bit more than they would have maybe if we didn't do this. But the vast majority of people are going to save a tremendous amount of money.
Right, and I notice, your models are run in the aggregate, and I get the aggregate. I'm just saying, but it comes down to the individual house level. There is a consequence to that. And I noticed in some of the other testimony, and you mentioned other states do it, but some do apply it on a countywide or a statewide, and then it's proportionally everybody's still treated the same. You follow? At least we're all moving because the cap is applied at a high level rather than individual. But I know others have questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question. Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do agree with what the past representative was saying because the values of newer, better homes grow faster than older homes. And if they're trying to reap their amount of money at 3% going up for everybody, it is going to be a bigger jump on the lower end houses. My question is, why would we want to go back to 2022 instead of just sticking with where it is now? Because if we cap both of them and put them together, pretty soon it won't take very long till we're way out of whack with what the current values are. I mean, why don't we just go from today's values? Why do we want to go back to 2022?
Well, let me address the questions in the order you raised. There certainly are circumstances where some of the lower values homes grow slower, but there are also circumstances, I remember very specifically, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, where the largest increase in Johnson County was on the lowest valued homes. They were going like 13, 14%, because they actually broke it out by price range. And the lowest increase was on the $1 million plus homes. So it can work both ways.
I'm just trying to protect the lower income people living in the lower income houses.
Well, but I would submit that most of those lower income people are still going to benefit, because odds are you might get a year where it's only 3% or 2%, but there's a lot of people who are getting in those areas. They're getting 5, 6, 10%, sometimes 20%. I know that because we hear that from them. We get a tremendous amount of calls, maybe not as much as you all do from your constituents, but we hear from a lot of people, and we don't hear from millionaires. We hear from people with tears in their eyes. My home is only this. I'm paying more tax than I paid for the mortgage when I first bought it, and it went up this much. So,
Mr. Trauber, we need to keep it moving. I hate to cut you off, I really do, but we did.
You need to, because, you know, I can talk all day.
Yeah, I appreciate you being willing to field all the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. We'll have to move on along to the opponents, and I'd like to welcome first Aaron Mays.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, members of the committee. My name is Aaron Mays. I'm here representing the Kansas Association of Counties today. I thank you for the time. We stand in opposition to this bill, and I think the peanut of why we stand in opposition is because it doesn't lower property taxes. We are big proponents of lowering property taxes. Property tax relief is in our legislative agenda. It's the second item listed in there. And unfortunately, this bill does not do that. Previous conferee used the term psychological pressure. And if we want to put psychological pressure into the state constitution, then this is a bill for that. But when you look at the mathematics of it, it doesn't change anything about property taxes. So when you look at property taxation, there are 3 components. There's the valuation, there's the budget, and then there's the mill levy. And of those 3, the budget is the most important piece. The budget determines the mill levy, and then the valuations determine how much that individual property pays based on the mill levy that has been determined. So what this bill does not do is reduce costs. It doesn't reduce tax exemptions. It doesn't reduce state mandates, and it doesn't reduce property taxes. So if we do want real property tax relief in Kansas, we need to reduce state-funded mandates, which would then reduce budgets at the local level, or we need to reduce exemptions, which would bring in more revenue that local governments could use to lower property taxes. So with that, I would be happy to stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mays. Again, we'll take questions at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome John Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am John Donnelly, and it's nice to be back in front of the House Tax Committee again. I'm going to read something that I actually don't normally read. I always have it in my written testimony, but I am going to read that if the chair would allow me to. But Kansas Farm Bureau, who I'm here representing today, is the state's largest general farm organization, representing more than 30,000 members, farm and ranch families throughout our 105 county farm bureaus. The reason I want to do that is I also want to explain our policy process a little bit. There's been a lot of talk about how great this will be for agriculture, and I'm not here to tell you there will be times where agricultural land values are increasing on individual properties greater than 3%, and this cap would benefit them by shifting that extra tax burden onto those properties at that time that are not increasing by 3%. But I do want to make it clear that the Kansas Farm Bureau membership has thoroughly vetted this issue. In fact, after we testified in opposition of this similar resolution last year, we have what they call issues surfacing meetings in the spring in each of our districts around the state. This issue came up in several of them. There were proposals to directly change Kansas Farm Bureau policy to support a 3% assessment cap. That came from numerous, it was suggested at numerous issue surfacing meetings. That then feeds into our resolutions committee, who then meets, determines whether they want to move that forward or not. At that time, they did determine that they wanted to hear more from all of the counties since these several districts had raised this issue. It went out to all of the district listening posts, which is the second part of our policy development process. At that point, the members talked about this in all of these listening posts, and it came back to the resolutions committee, which at that time, due to the information that was collected at those listening posts, directly decided not to forward this policy resolution to change Kansas Farm Bureau's policy on this point. There was also an effort then at our annual meeting, all of the policies go forward. There was an effort of some of the, I don't know who it was, but there were obviously people that supported this legislation, this resolution. There were numerous text messages sent out to a large percentage of our delegate body, over 300 delegates that vote on our annual policy in December. And no one made the motion to approve this policy change within Kansas Farm Bureau policy. So the only reason I want to mention that is because Kansas Farm Bureau has a true grassroots policy development process. We listen to our 105 Kansas county farm bureaus, and they all had access to this specific topic, and they did not change our policy. We still strongly oppose this policy. I don't want that to be confused by some of the testimony that you have heard today. There probably are members out there that would be supportive of this. I'm not going to say they're not. There's times where my land would probably be positively affected and my tax rates would go down because of this cap. However, our policy has not changed, and agriculture in the state of Kansas does not support that through Kansas Farm Bureau policy, does not support this resolution. Sorry, that was a little longer-winded, but I felt it needed to be stated. The one thing that I do think is that I want to address, and again, you have my written testimony in front of you, but it has been, I know, proposed that this is it's changed from last year's proposal because last year was technically an appraisal cap. This is an assessment cap. I'm actually going to use some of the examples that were thrown around earlier. And if you want to, scratch this down because I'll have a point at the end. But if you take that $100,000 residence times 0.115 times 1.03, that is what this cap would be doing. Last year, if you take 100,000 times 1.03 times 0.115, that is what last year's cap would have been doing. Look at those two numbers and remember the commutative property of multiplication. A times B times C equals A times C times B. This is the same legislation that you voted against last year. Don't be confused by that. That's as simple as I can make it. It's the commutative property of multiplication. And sorry, I homeschool my kids, so I just had that lesson in sixth grade math. But so that's why I was reminded of that. But anyways, I wanted to make that point. The other thing that I think in the questions that was already addressed, what this truly does is shift property taxes around. Properties that exceed the 3% valuation increase in a given year on an individual property will benefit from this cap. Who will not benefit is all of the properties that do not increase above 3% this year. This is as simple as that. And appraisals, accurate appraisals are the method by which we have a true and accurate property tax appraisal system. So with that, I'll stand for questions, and we obviously oppose this legislation.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome Mark Toom.
Chairman Smith, members of the House Taxation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide opponent testimony regarding SCR 1616. And I am Mark Toom, Vice President of Governmental Affairs with Kansas Realtors. And I feel like we've been here before. And from my point of view, the property tax debate is starting to seem a little like the movie Groundhog's Day, with the same thing happening over and over and over again. I want to be clear that Kansas Realtors support property tax relief, and we will continue to support legislation that provides both targeted relief, such as those included in Senate Bill 402 being heard tomorrow, and broad-based relief efforts such as HB 2011 that deals with the statewide school levy that passed out of the committee last month. Those efforts provide actual relief. Unfortunately, SCR 1616 will give property owners and taxpayers the false perception that they'll pay less in taxes. And really, all the proponents talked about this amendment in the context of property taxes and the need to lower them, and that this amendment will do just that. But unfortunately, that's simply not the case for all property owners. Property tax obligation, like it's been stated several times, is a formula, and local government will still be able to raise the amount of revenue unencumbered by anything having to do with valuation increases. And I want to reinforce that point. There's nothing in this amendment that changes local government spending. We have an overall tax system, and in general, our tax system says if you buy more things, you pay more in the sales tax. If you make more in income, you pay more in income tax. However, this amendment is saying that if you have a property increasing in value, you shouldn't actually pay more. We have types of properties and locations of properties that the values increase at higher rates. Those properties will enjoy tax relief, and I think that was mentioned in the questioning of the proponents. And I think that it will leave those people in those classes of property that don't grow with an additional tax burden, because they should have a reduced tax burden. And it's similar to a balloon and you squeezing that. I think that it's really about tax fairness. So even a change in ownership during this, during a truly arm's length transaction, something that should clearly establish an accurate real-time data of its value, the property will still be limited to 3% increase year over year. That change becomes more drastic over time and could eventually mimic, I think, what's seen in California, where you have people increasingly unlikely to move away from tax-advantaged properties. So with that, the hour's getting late. There are other issues, I think, with the home building of new home construction, but I think there are other conferees that will talk to that. I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I'd like to welcome Sean Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think maybe I'm who Mark was talking about on the home builder front. So good order there by Leah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sean Miller. I represent the Kansas Building Industry Association. We are the residential home builders within the state of Kansas. And I want to put on the record that while we oppose SCR 1616, we do not oppose property tax reform. We pay property taxes. We're concerned with property taxes just like everybody else. But what we want to try to do, what we want to try to be very clear that we do, is avoid unintended consequences to these. I stated it in the Senate side, the conferees, the proponents on the Senate side were, there was a few more individuals, and what we heard a lot was, please pass this to cut my taxes. And with one small asterisk, I just want to point out that passing this does not cut your taxes. I had joked with Mark about bringing a balloon here today, and I was going to say, as the senator from Sedgwick County, the representative from Sedgwick County pointed out, your budget is sort of stable. Maybe you're in a big balloon county, maybe you're in a small balloon county. But if you squeeze down the assessed valuation, it's just going to inflate the mill levy rates. So without some kind of cap on the mill levy, your constituents will not be seeing property tax from this because there is no cap on the mill levy rate. Maybe it's a societal pressure and they don't feel like they ought to do it as much, but there's nothing in here that impacts that. I gave you one small asterisk. The asterisk is the 20 mills. The fiscal note, or the fiscal impact, it's not a fiscal note, has been mentioned a time or two. It will reduce the value or your taxes on the 20 mills if your house is growing by more than 3%. Looking at it, I think it's probably about $4 per percent. So if your house grows at 5%, you're probably saving about $10, $8, okay? So, but short of that, it really doesn't do anything to lower your taxes. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is we do have a number of states that have done this. You'll hear this from both proponents and opponents. Sort of the earliest version of this is what we call California Prop 13. There are a lot of policies in California, some that we maybe like and some that we maybe don't. But generally, I would suggest that there is a very significant difficulty in new home construction in California. Not just because of this, it's for a number of reasons. But the cities of Dallas and Fort Worth last year built more homes than the state of California did. So a lot of this is going to point towards some difficulties in new home construction. I do want to point out 3 specific things in the bill, and I'll move on pretty quickly. Number 1, we have a concern. If you look at our testimony, this limits the valuation 3% year over year, with the exception of improvements. We don't really know what improvements are. It says in the resolution, improvements can be defined by a future legislature. In Oklahoma, as I read it, it simply says improvements just don't re-trigger. So we're good with that. Don't worry about it. I do want to thank the Senate committee. I raised in the Senate committee, I said, okay, what if we need to paint the house for just regular maintenance purposes? If we paint the house, is that an improvement? Have we triggered evaluation after 10 years of capped assessments where I paint the house for a few $1,000s and boom, I've now increased the value of my house by $40,000. So they did put in a piece that says regular maintenance is exempt from this, but we still don't know what improvements are going to look like. If we remodel a bathroom, if we have to do those kinds of things, are we going to trigger a full rebase on that? So that's definitely some concern that we have there, and the impact that it might have on residential remodeling, the ability to age in place with some additional ramps or rails in the bathroom, those kinds of things. From a development standpoint, and there's a lot of local government experience on this committee, as we try to get new construction, new home developments, particularly in rural communities, but in urban as well. We often look at unique financing arrangements, TIF districts, things like that. If we put an artificial cap on this and it is successful in keeping the assessed valuation down, then we are now extending out the repayment period for our TIF districts. So if we need to open 5 new developments in our rural community to support whatever the local manufacturing is, and we think it's going to pay off in 10 years, now it may not pay off for 18 years. So we're looking at a longer payback period and a more difficult ability to do new construction there. And one of the things I want to point out is the reason that there's some heartburn around residential valuations. They have increased a lot. I got those appraisals in the mail this week as well, and I'll be very selfish here. I'm just going to talk about my perception. And my house has gone up in value a lot, particularly since COVID, and I don't love it because I'm not ready to sell it. If I put my house on the market today at what I got from the Shawnee County appraiser yesterday, I would have an offer by tomorrow. However, as somebody who wants to stay in that, I don't love that new tax burden for another 10 years until I can realize that valuation. So I'm not convinced that statewide, I do believe in some local places there are some issues, but statewide there is an issue overall with valuations. The final thing that I want to say, and I do think this is a slightly improved version from last year, because last year, if I sold my home to a younger couple because I don't need the space anymore and I'm moving to a smaller place, last year, that would have triggered a new valuation for them. Their taxes would have been significantly higher than what I pay. This passes that benefit on to the purchaser. The problem is I have to move into a new place, and if that new place is a new construction, then I have not gotten any value from that, right? Because that new construction is likely to be significantly higher in cost because we don't have a lot of available housing here. And so what we rely on a lot in the real estate market is first-time home buyers moving into a bigger home as they have 2 or 3 kids. As they become empty nesters, they downsize and they move into a smaller home. And if I've got 25 years of locked-in valuations, why the heck would I give that up to move into a smaller home? So now I am this, a 50-year-old person living in a 3-bedroom house that doesn't need the other 2 bedrooms, when there's probably a young family that could really utilize that. But I stay here because it will cost me more to move into a smaller new place that should be worth less because it's significantly smaller because I don't have that 15, 20, 30 years of capped valuation. So it really creates an artificial system. And if it, in fact, capped revenues or it capped mill levies and it did both of those things, I'd probably stand here and say it creates an artificial system, but it does what it's intended to do. This just creates an artificial system, in my opinion, and it does nothing to cap those new revenues or those tax rates. So I anticipate if this passes, it's on the ballot and the folks vote for it next year, my assessment will look very different, but my tax bill will look exactly the same. Unless Mr. Mays, who is my Shawnee County Commissioner, just decides we don't need a lot of the things that we did last year and we go to slashing at the county budget level. So I have 147.915 mills in my house, and 127.915 mills of those would not be impacted by this, except for the fact that next year I would probably have 168 point whatever mills. So I love the idea. I really applaud both the Senate and the House for continuing to take on this fight, for trying to figure out what it is. I know members of this committee are frustrated because you feel like we've been talking about this for 2 or 3 years, but I've been doing this for 33 now over a couple of different states, and I can tell you it's been going on for 100+ years, this very debate right now. So there's not an easy solution, but I applaud you trying. I'm not sure this is the right fit, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome Aaron Popelka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Aaron Popelka, the Kansas Livestock Association. KLA opposes this legislation, but I want to be clear, we support property tax relief. And you've seen me up here testifying on bills that would do that. And I'm going to be somewhat repetitive, but sometimes repetition can help us understand topics a little more. The reason why you've seen every opponent get up here and say this is not going to provide property tax relief on the locally assessed taxes is because it won't. And that gets to the formula of how we calculate property taxes. So we have valuation, which is set by your appraiser at fair market value. We've talked about the difference with ag use value. So that's one of the exceptions. But valuation times the assessment rate, and that is set in the Constitution. So it's 11.5% for residential, 30% for agriculture, 25% for commercial and agricultural improvements. So agricultural improvements are taxed at fair market value. That would be like grain bins, cattle feed yards, dairies, the things that aren't the land. Okay, and then the last part is the mill levy. And outside of the 20 mills that the state requires school districts to levy, let me say that again, the state requires school districts to levy it. So I've served on city council, I'm currently on a school board. As a board member, I don't have a choice to do 18 or 19, I have to do 20 because you require it, and then we send that money to the state general fund, and then we get it back through the school finance formula. Outside of that 20 mills, everything else is assessed by local taxing authorities, and Representative Howerton, you hit the nail on the head. As you look at local governments, we set a budget. And that budget, we can have in mind what we want to target for taxes for our constituents, but we have to fund the things, if it's a city, streets and sewer, and if it's a school, our staff and infrastructure, we have to fund those things, so we set a budget. And things that aren't paid for by other revenue sources, like for city at the sales tax level, is sent to the clerk, is certified to the county clerk, and that clerk is required to set the mill levy at the rate that funds that budget. So Mr. Miller mentioned the balloon. So if you cap assessed values at 3%, all the clerk will do to fund the budget for that year is increase the mill levy. So on balance, you have not changed the amount of taxes paid into local government. What you will do, and why we're here opposing this, is you will shift the burden among subclasses and classes of property. I have an example, and I'll run through the numbers, but the other thing to keep in mind here, this cap only applies to real property. It does not apply to personal property. Personal property is assessed the same mills as real property. So if you don't cap personal, and that's your vehicles, it's oil and gas. If you have a boat, maybe that's it too. Maybe we don't care about fun items, but vehicles are kind of a necessity. Your constituents will see the taxes go up on their vehicles, okay? So as we look at the subclasses, what I asked the chairman last year for permission to work with the Department of Revenue Property Valuation Division and pull 5 years of data. Why 5? Because 5 years is as far back as PVD felt comfortable retrieving data for. I would have loved to do 10 or 20, but that's the actual data PVD felt comfortable pulling at that time at the county level, and that's important. Because these are local mills, we have to at least do the analysis at the county level. I know there's a proponent up here talking about 20 years of data. That is at the aggregate at the state level. But what we're talking about is local mills. So you can't just say, well, mill levy is going to increase gradually over time, and so we did this analysis and everybody benefits. No. You have to do it at the local level so you can adjust the local mill levy to meet that budget in that year. So that's what, if you look at my testimony, I have the data on all 105 counties, but I did Shawnee because we're here in Shawnee County. So if you look at it, at the top you'll see actuals. Those are actual assessed values and actual mill levies in Shawnee County in 19 and 20. If you look the next block down is if PVD ran these numbers, they said if you applied 3%, here's what the assessed values in these real subclasses would look like. Then PVD went and said, if we adjusted the mills in the county to raise enough revenue to fund the budgets that existed in those years, here's what it looks like. So all I did, this is a portion of the spreadsheet that's mine, is in yellow, is I calculated the actual liability for those subclasses. And then I took the difference, and that's the green and red, okay? So you can see there's a residential line, there's an agricultural line, there's commercial and industrial, and I want to be clear here, commercial and industrial is not just factories, okay? That's your Main Street businesses. That's restaurants, that's accountant's office, you name it. And so if we start in the first year, you see that residential would change a little bit, pay a little less in taxes. Ag commercial would go up a little bit. The next year, you see in 21, residential is paying a little bit less. Agriculture and commercial is paying a little more. 22, the same thing. I'm going to jump to 24, which is the last page. And if this cap had been in effect in 2019, what you see is that residential would be paying in Shawnee County almost 8% less. Agricultural land would be paying almost 19% more. And commercial and industrial, again, not just manufacturing, but Main Street businesses would be paying almost 11% more in tax in Shawnee County. And that's this run over the 5-year period. And again, because our name was mentioned by a proponent, I feel the need to address that. I would have loved to have 20 years of data, but PVD did not feel that they could go back at that time and pull that data. The 20 years that's being used in the proponent's testimony is available on the website. I found it, it's there, and you can see it, but you can't run this analysis at the state level, and you cannot just assume a steady mill levy increase over time. You have to adjust for the local budgets in the given year. That's why the data that was shown by the proponent shows, well, everybody would get a break. Well, no, the math doesn't math, because at the end of the day, it's a net zero. The other thing I wanted to mention that's in the proponent's testimony is they made some assumptions about the change in ag value over time and that by next year we're going to see ag use value increase. That is not going to happen. First off, the use value formula runs on a 2-year delay. We know for the last 2 years, crop prices have been depressed. So then I said, well, what's the best projection for future crop prices? That's the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Their Economic Research Services does 10-year projections. So I was like, oh, I'm going to pull that on corn. Their corn range for the next 10 years was in the 420 to 440 per bushel range. Corn right now, if you look at the futures, is just above 430. So I don't know how the projections in that testimony show that ag values are going to spike 10, 12% over the next 10 years when the best estimator out there, the U.S. government, says that's not going to happen. I don't know, it's projections, but that's the best numbers we got. So I don't know how the proponent got to those numbers. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we'd urge the committee not to adopt this, and happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
We do have Tim Graham and Leah Fleiter, but I do not see them in the audience. That might be written-only testimony. Is there anyone else that's wishing to appear before the committee and speak as an opponent? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and open it up now for questions. Committee, are there any questions for these conferees? Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. So we've heard everybody today, but we need to get something passed for the people of the state. And the frustrating thing about it is, most of the people who are against this, they've had a year to come up with something that will work for the taxpayers. You may not like everything, but you would think between you and the Senate, you two are smart enough to come up with a good property tax bill. So if anybody's got a plan to make it better, other than just leaving it like it is, I think our taxpayers deserve an answer better than nothing. So that's just my thought.
Okay. Any questions, committee? Representative Kahar.
Thank you. My question would be for Aaron Mays with the Kansas Association of Counties. Thank you. Could you give me an idea of how much overall the county assessments have increased over the last 5 years compared to CPI over the last 5 years?
No, I don't believe I could provide that off the top of my head. I mean, we could probably figure that out. I know the state keeps pretty good records of that. And I think it's different county by county as well.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get an idea of that. It's been a concern of mine for quite some time that our property taxes are tied to the volatile housing market and what that means for people who are trying to stay in their homes. And so one that would help me to have that information, because it seems as if the local communities have kind of taken advantage of the housing market and use that to increase taxes at a disproportionate rate to the increased CPI over the last 5 years or so, probably longer than that. I didn't imagine you'd have that memorized, but just in case you had some of those stats, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment and then a question. I don't know if everybody caught it, but Eric S.'s daughter is flying with the 190th right now over the Middle East and refueling those sorties that are flying on a constant time frame. So just want to say I'm praying for your daughter, and I hope she stays okay. The second thing is, I read the bill, and I think you brought it up a little just a little ago, Mr. Chair, that the assessed valuation remains in place whenever the property is transferred. So if I understand it right, and maybe I don't, I'm not sure who to ask this question to. If the valuation, if it increases 3% every year, and then they go to sell that house, and then it goes the actual valuation of it, how does that impact it if the way it's written here? So I'm kind of confused on how that was worded and how that would impact the future valuation of the home. So.
Right, and I might turn to the reviser if I say this wrong, but the resolution we had last year, I think if you sold the property, the new buyers, it would be assessed at the new, it would reset to the new fair market value at 100%. I think the way this current one is drafted is the cap stays with the property. So I think it was Mr. Miller that had given the example, if he had been in his home for a while and was had 25 years of capped value, but then he wanted to move into a brand new home that maybe didn't have, maybe it was only a 2 or 3 year old home or a brand new one, the difference could be drastic because of that new home is going to start out on the market at 100% of its fair market value, and then that's where it starts from there. So unless I mentioned or said that wrong, this one, you could sell it once, you could sell it 5 times, it stays with the property. The whoever owns it doesn't matter.
So I guess my concern then over this situation that would be for the real estate industry out there, that is going to be impacted drastically by a bill that is set like this. When we go to sell a home, and it's only that's going to follow with it. If the actual value we're going to pay for the house, but then when we get into it, it's going to go back down to that 3%. That's the way it seems to me, the way it's worded. I don't know if that's it or not, but I just think it's going to impact our real estate industry quite a bit if this passes.
Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Donnelly, you look like you're fired up, and I want to hear what you got to say. So thank you.
Don't encourage him.
Yeah, I apologize. I was passionate.
I'm kidding. Go ahead. Representative Smith, did you have a...
Hear what I had to say on that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Did I? I didn't mean to. Okay, I apologize.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this might be addressed for Mark Toombs with the realtors. So some of what I think is somewhat anecdotal, and the data that Aaron with the KLA had is somewhat pertinent to this. But my major concern, I think, with this aspect is 2 things. It's one, I've had this house for 25 years, and then it's somewhat equivalent to a new built house. That discrepancy in valuation between a new home, taxation between a new home and a somewhat equivalent 25-year-old home. But also part of that is just like classes of real property can vary at different rates. Is there any data that shows how different levels of homes grow at different rates? In other words, I have this perception that I have a very marketable home. It will increase at value higher than some entry-level housing housing stock that's a number of years old. Is there any data like that nationwide?
Absolutely. A good question. We do collect that information through our MLS, and there are certainly segments and types of properties that grow at further higher rates. I think it was mentioned earlier, but maybe $1 million house that only increases a percent. $1 million and $1 million plus houses stay on the market a little bit longer. They have to find that right buyer, essentially. So maybe they don't appreciate at that same level, whereas there's a sweet spot of that people are looking. It's supply and demand. So there's a certain segment that people are looking for, and those do increase at higher percentages. And we could get that kind of data through our MLS.
And I would be interested in like some of those growth factors over 10 years or something like that. Because, the example that we saw from KLA, that only dealt with the discrepancy after 5 years, and that difference continues to grow, I think, over time.
I would agree. I think it does, the discrepancy, and I think that's what led to the big change in the late 80s. And I would hate to do some harm that we're going to have to come back and fix.
And this is kind of a theoretical question, and maybe you don't want to chime in, but, we all are a free market economy in this nation. And does this interfere with the free market for your members?
I've absolutely, caps, artificial caps, I think are counterintuitive in this. So yes, we subscribe to definitely free market principles, and I think that this would distort that and create inequality within the property tax system.
Is it kind of a price control?
That'd be one way of looking at it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Representative Cahar.
This would be for Mr. Toom as well. How would the assessment value serve as a price control?
I think the price control is really dealing with you create a disparity between new construction and existing housing stock. It's going to be it's going to be a rolling process. So every year, you're going to have new housing that goes online, and it's going to be taxed at a different rate. So it'll be a difference than what previous housing stock would be. That's going to not, it won't enjoy the benefit.
To clarify, would you prefer it to not, the assessment to change every time an owner changed, or would you prefer it to the assessed value to transfer with the owner?
I want something that actually lowers property taxes first and foremost. So I think when you're dealing with only one part of the equation, the property tax question is still going to remain. So I don't know, doing those little tinkering things like that, property taxes are still not going to be decreased.
Thank you. And that was something that I've experienced on my council, on my governing body, and several government meetings that I've been to. They'll say, well, come in and complain about their property taxes at the revenue neutral meeting or wherever it is. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, don't blame me, your house went up in value. Well, that doesn't put more money in their bank account. And so I think what this does is actually helps separate the assessed value from the appraised value, which it doesn't force the local government to lower the mill levy, but it sure brings a little more transparency to it.
I don't think it has any effect on the mill levy side of the equation. It only changes who pays the taxes. It's again that balloon example.
Any further questions, committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to our neutral testimony, and we do have one speaking to the committee, Barb Esfield.
Okay, thank you, Adam Smith, Chair. And I'll make this fast as I can. I know you all are very tired of sitting here.
Take your time. This is an important topic.
And I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you and present neutral testimony on Senate Concurrent Resolution 1616. Give you a little background about myself so that you know where my background comes from. I am currently a Barton County Commissioner, but I'm representing the Kansas Legislative Policy Group, or the KLPG group. Previously, I was a Barton County appraiser. Before that, I was in Russell County and Ford County. So I have 36 years of county appraisal experience. I'm also an independent fee appraiser, and I serve with the Board of Tax Appeals as a small claim hearings officer. So I think it's important that you understand how wide my background is and the exposure that I bring to tax policy and local government and property valuations. Just so you know, KLPG serves 33 counties across the western part of Kansas, and our mission has been to ensure that counties retain the ability to serve their communities effectively. So that's where the KLPG comes from. SRC 1616 proposes a constitutional amendment that would limit the annual increases to the final tax assessed value of real property and certain mobile homes as 3%, which you've heard today. And this would roll back to 2022, assessed values, unless, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, unless there is an exception, or as I believe it reads, exemption. And I don't want you to get confused on the exemption part of that, because sometimes we think of exemption as a good thing, but this would exempt you from the cap. While this proposal may appear to provide tax relief, it does not actually reduce property taxes. It redistributes the tax burden. As you know, local governments are responsible for funding essential services. If the assessed value of some properties are artificially limited below market growth, the cost of providing those services does not disappear. Instead, that responsibility shifts to other taxpayers or property classifications. Over time, this approach can significantly be inequitable amongst property owners. Two similar situated neighbors could pay very different property taxes simply because one property has experience improvements or changes that trigger an exception while another one has not. And hopefully you received my example. I took a picture of a house A and B just so that you could see it, because I know that sometimes that helps if you see two properties that are very similar. Now that would be the same for commercial and other type of properties too. And in that particular example that I handed out, those homes are very similar. Only one of them, house A, is actually a little bit nicer, and if it was placed on the market, it would sell for a little more money, except for house B that actually would and had a building permit for a shed. That building permit could have been for a bathroom remodel or a kitchen remodel, but house B is going to pay if mill levies stayed the same in our county. And I looked at overall mill levies, and that's kind of about the average levy across the state. I did check that for you. House B would pay almost $1,000 more than House A. Now, I want property relief as much as anybody, and I really appreciate the Senate and the House both working on that. But I don't think those two owners are going to appreciate that. And to further complicate that, even in Barton County alone, we offered facade grants, which was our own money. It wasn't grant money that we set aside to improve our downtown row property. If this was passed, we've actually effectively hurt our owners in our properties that took that money, and because that was after 2022. And so they'll be paying considerably more taxes than their competitor. So that would be one of the things that I want you guys to think about. In addition to these policy concerns, the administrative challenges would be extremely significant. And this is something that I'll point out to you that no one's pointed out today. To implement the rollback provisions of SCR 1616, county appraisers would effectively need to review properties parcel by parcel to determine whether each qualifies for removal of the 3% cap. That process would require reconstructing valuation data back to 2022, identifying qualifying changes to each property, and determine whether those changes meet satisfactory definitions that would take them out of the cap. I cannot tell you how difficult that would be. You just think about being a county appraiser or an independent fee appraiser. If you had to look back from today's date and go clear back and sift through all of the data clear back until 2022 to see if that changed, it's almost next to impossible, I can guarantee you. And you can talk to other appraisers about that too. Many counties simply do not have the staff, time, or financial resources to conduct that level of retroactive analysis. Compounding this challenge, not all counties require or receive building permits or property improvements, and many value-increasing changes never trigger a permit at all. Even where permits are required, systems vary widely and records are not always comprehensive enough to determine whether a property would qualify for the exception. County appraisal offices already operate with a limited personnel and heavy workloads. Implementing and tracking these requirements would require new systems, additional staffing, and additional administrative costs. Finally, the complexity of determining whether a change qualifies and an improvement qualifies for that exemption or is just a regular repair would likely lead to increased appeals and litigation both before the Board of Tax Appeals and District Court. And then along those appeals, I have a question for you. Have any of you ever appealed your value before? No. Okay, thank you. I was hoping that a few of you have and that you've went through the process. Where I'm going with that is that when you go through that process, somebody's explaining your appraisal, hopefully on a local level, and why it was the way it was. Well, if you go ahead and appeal this, if this passes and you appeal your value, you're going to sit there and they're going to talk about your value. But someone's going to probably want to do the math and find out, okay, this is your value. But what are you really paying taxes on? Because I can tell you that 90% of the appeals that I have heard over the years, whether it be for the Board of Tax Appeals or local level, most of them are about taxes. And you know, as a county appraiser, I felt like it was my duty to be compassionate enough and help them, even though I only set the value, be compassionate enough to tell them how their taxes were arrived, because we all have to pay taxes, and it helps to know that. But if you appeal to the Board of Tax Appeals to me, I would have no way. I might lower your value if it needed to be lowered, but I'd have no way to tell you what you're really paying taxes on. So it complicates an already complicated system. If the goal is meaningful property tax relief, we should focus on comprehensive and sustainable tax policy solutions, constitutional valuation caps that redistribute tax burdens, create disparities between taxpayers, and significantly increase administrative complexity are unlikely to achieve that goal. And I appreciate your time today to talk about a little bit of something from the administrative point, and glad to take any questions.
Yes, Barb, thank you very much. Barb's a good friend of mine. I appreciate your experience from the appraisers to the Board of Tax Appeals to a county commissioner. You might be the best qualified in this entire building to give us perspective from all of those areas of expertise. So thank you for your testimony. Committee, are there any questions? Representative Smith?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Forgive me, young lady, I didn't hear a lot of what you said. I was trying to figure this out. But looking at your sheet, why would you be neutral?
Well, and you know, I knew that you were somebody was gonna ask that, and I'm serving on behalf of right now representing the KLPG, and the whole program of implementing, I like the policy. I love what the Senate is trying to do, and you with your other bill of lowering property taxes. And from a county commissioner, we're a bit odd. We've lowered our mill levy over the last 5 years, 14 mills, so we are trying to cut back and join services. But the reason that I'm testifying neutral is it isn't the whole idea. I'm just here to tell you how hard it's going to be to implement it so that you can think about that going forward.
Representative Howerton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a process person, and I just spent the last committee talking about that. So thank you for being here. This was actually very good for me to help me understand it. So if I summed up what you're saying, this incentivizes property deterioration, and there's no mechanism for proving improvements or making improvements without home inspections.
And that's a big fear that I have with it. And I feel bad as a county commissioner that we've enforced or helped our taxpayers all along our Main Street corridors. We have over 50 properties just in Great Bend that have taken us up on that. Well, I don't think they're going to be real happy with us when they find out that they're not going to be capped at 3% and their friends are. And going forward, you'd have to think about that. Since it's 3% a year, going forward, you know, me as a homeowner, I'll think about, did I really want to attach that garage to my house or remodel my kitchen, or am I okay just to stay here and not do anything and be capped?
If I could follow up, so you lowered your mill, did you lower your budget as well?
We did. We've worked, and so, and Senator Tyson is also a friend of mine, and I respect her and her committee. But I told her that this will really hurt us because we've already worked us. We're working with other counties to do joint county health nurses, joint 911. We're trying to save taxpayer dollars every way we can. And so we've kind of gotten ourselves so lean. Now, that's just Barton County, but talking about the KLPG, as I told you, we're the western states. And so we're states, and this is another thing for you to think about for the KLPG, and this won't sound very neutral, but those counties don't have growth. And when I hold hearings for Wyandotte and Johnson, I see a lot of growth and more sales tax. Those counties don't have, some of them don't even have a Walmart. They don't have the sales tax, and they don't have the new build going on, so this will really hurt them as well.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Going once, going twice.
You all have a tough job, but thank you for listening.
Committee, we do have several written-only neutral, I believe written-only. Is there anyone else wishing to appear before the committee and speak as neutral? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing. Committee, I know the hour is getting late, but so is our time in session. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take a look at a couple of quick bills that we can hopefully get kicked out. We had scheduled to work House Bill 2541 and House Bill 2005. I'd ask the reviser to review House Bill 2541 to start, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2541 would enact the Kansas Rural Business Growth Program Act, which would establish a premium tax credit program to be administered by the Secretary of Commerce for the purpose of incentivizing capital investment in rural areas.
Sorry, committee questions, Representative Averkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So spent a lot of time reading through this bill, and I think what was on the surface, anyway, I think it's important to go through, I'd like to understand on page 1, the definition of capital investment. And I think it's important to walk through that. So Adam, when you say, can you give a more thorough definition of capital investment?
I mean, besides reading the definition, it's not, I know this is a fairly complex bill. I could read the definition, but to go into more greater detail would be, I'm not really equipped at this point. I mean, if you want the definition read, it would, means any equity investment in a rural fund by a rural investor that is either A, acquired on or after July 1 of 2026, and the equity investment original issuance was solely in exchange for cash, has 100% of equity investment cash purchase price used by the rural fund to make qualified investments in eligible businesses located in Kansas by the secondary anniversary of the initial credit allowance date, and is designated by the rural fund as a capital investment and certified by the department under Section 3. The capital investment shall include any capital investment that does not satisfy the requirements if such investment was a capital investment in the possession of a prior holder. I know it's probably not truly satisfactory. That's the extent of my knowledge of how this would work.
So tell me if I understand this correctly. A capital investment means an equity investment. An equity investment is essentially when the person buys part of the business. And they're going to buy the business or part of the business for cash, and then they're using that equity as the capital investment. So they're not loaning any cash to the business. They're not making a loan. They are simply buying that Kansas business and now using their equity as the quote-unquote certified investment. And then we're giving them a 60% tax credit on their purchase of a Kansas business. Is that correct?
Representative, if you don't mind, I might see, we do have some proponents in the audience. Would you be willing, I'd be willing to let them answer your question, because it doesn't look like we've got a good solid answer, but if they would be willing to come up, if you would entertain their answer.
As you wish, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Just for the record, if you don't mind introducing yourself again and address the question, please.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Representative, the capital investment that you're referencing in the bill is related to creating the fund. So groups like mine, I'm with Advantage Capital. We've participated in programs like this across the country. That capital investment and the equity that comes into it is all creating the $50 million pot at the beginning that we would go raise on day one. So that an insurance company is investing, if there's $30 million in tax credits in the back end of this program, they're investing in the fund today, $25, $28 million, whatever the price would be to invest. They're investing that today, and they're getting an equity stake in the whole fund. We then take that whole fund of 50 million and then invest it into small businesses via subordinated debt loans, mezzanine financing in $1 to $5 million chunks. So the actual small businesses in Kansas that are trying to grow, they're receiving a loan, but the capital investment is the total $50 million of private investment that we have to go raise to be able to then make those loans to the small businesses.
Okay. I think I'm following you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Happy to answer any other questions.
All right. Did that satisfy your question?
I'm getting there.
Okay. Okay, any more questions? Revise or explain the bill. Is there any questions on the bill? Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it might be a question for Eddie, and it's also, I think, partially for you. So this was presented as we were going to do away with the ROS program and do this as a replacement to have a more effective program for rural Kansas. There's nothing in the bill that does anything to make sure that happens, is there?
Regarding the ROS program, that expires at the end of this year. So absent any further legislative action, there's no language in this bill that repeals or sunsets that program. That program is already set to expire unless we would choose to renew it.
And then, part of that rationale was, I thought that it would be relatively inexpensive. Does anybody know how much we were spending a year on ROS or spent last year on ROS? Is there any equivalence here on that?
Yeah, we might see if research can pull that up. While we're waiting on that, is there any further questions on the bill? Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually want to piggyback just a tiny bit while they're looking up Representative Francis' question about ROS. It's my understanding that while it sunsets or we're letting it lapse this year, the individuals that are currently in the middle of ROS will continue to receive those benefits. Is that correct?
Yes, all of our programs, when they expire, that means they're not accepting new applicants. Obviously, they fulfill the obligations of anybody that is qualified for the program will continue as long as the program has stated originally. But yeah, it's not a repeal. The sunset just says there's no new applicants.
I got you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll turn to Eddie.
The last 3 years worth of tax expenditure reports indicate 2.8 million or 2.5 million, 1.8 million, and 1.6 million on the ROS income tax credit piece of this. The ROS program does also include the student loan repayment program that the state has a matching share in. My recollection is that that's between $1 and $1.5 million per year. Rachel's nodding from Department of Commerce in the audience, so it's somewhere in that ballpark per year.
There's no fiscal note on this for the first 2 years. Is that right? The tax credits go into effect in the third year. Is that? Am I remembering correctly?
I'll again turn to Eddie to look that up.
Yeah, this would have tax credits possible beginning in tax year 2028, which largely would flow through to state fiscal year 2029.
And this is only like a 5-year, 6-year tax credit, so we can evaluate after 5 or 6 years?
Is this a 5-year sunset? Okay, yeah. Yes, it is a 5-year program.
Well, anyway, I think this is a program that's worth giving a shot to. We continue to lose our community banks in rural Kansas. They get bought out by bigger and bigger banks. And it just seems like we have more and more trouble getting access to commercial loans in rural Kansas.
Do you want to? I may have made a mistake by saying it was a 5-year sunset. Representative Sawyer's looking up some information on his laptop.
Yeah, it doesn't appear to be a sunset in here, but the tax credits can be carried forward for 5 years. But I don't see a sunset actually in the bill.
Okay, help me understand the distinction.
Well, it just means when you get the tax credit, you don't use it all in 1 year, you can carry it forward for 5
Oh,
years.
you can carry it forward for 5 years?
Yeah, so it's totally different than a sunset.
Okay.
Okay, we're not really discussing the bill yet. Is there any further questions for staff on the bill? Okay. Representative Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I'm correct, correct me if I'm wrong, ROS was a 5-year or 3-year, 5, I think. And then as people fall off, it's going to be less each year that's taken out of it. I do know that part.
The Rural Opportunity Zone program was created back in either 2011 or 2012, and it has had several sunsets over the years that have been extended each time. But the program provides for 5 years worth of benefits for a participant. Yeah.
So if we don't allow anybody in, it gets less and less each year because they fall off. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. In anticipation that we might work this bill, if you remember during the hearing, there was some Department of Commerce, I think, I can't remember if you guys were neutral or what the situation was, but there was some discrepancy. I did encourage the proponents to work with Department of Commerce to put together kind of some amendments. There were some differences in the numbers, and I might ask the revisor to pass that out at this time. But there were several different provisions that Department of Commerce had requested. And so the amendment that's being passed out is, as I understand, it's kind of the compromise between the proponents and the Department of Commerce on where some of those numbers needed to land. Okay, it looks like everybody's had a chance to get that in their hands, and I know there's just several little balloon amendments throughout this, and I might see if Adam, or Mr. Siebers, if you might want to just quickly go over some of the substantive changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, going on to page 2, I mean, I included all pages in this, so some of them don't, but just to make it clear of what's being amended and what's not. First, starting on page 2, under the definition of qualified investment, decreases the maximum amount of investments made in any one eligible business from what was the greater of 20% of the rural funds capital investment authority, or $6,500,000, and that's been decreased to $5 million. Excuse me. Some changes, I believe, were more technical. On page 2, you can see references to equity investment or capital investment. Going on page 3, I believe this was a commerce request, increasing the amount of days for them to approve or deny an application from 30 to 45 days. Moving on to page 5. As far as I could tell, most of these were more technical in nature and references. Then on page 6, this was a increase from 80% to 90%, whereby if the rural fund fails to maintain qualified investments, the investment would have to be made within a rural area was increased from 80% to 90%. And that, so a corollary, instead of 20% in a non-rural area or outside a rural area, that was decreased to 10%.
Thank you, Adam. I know the biggest changes was changing the $6.5 million to the $5 million, the 30 days to 45 days, and then the 80-20 to the 90-10 proportion on those. But Is there any discussion? I'll go ahead and offer the amendment. I can't explain it any more than that. Like I said, this was kind of a compromise between the proponents and the Department of Commerce to make sure this program would work effectively. But I'll go ahead and offer this amendment. And Representative Hoheisel for a second. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close and move my amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Representative Everkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's a bad bill for a couple different reasons. The first one is simply because we're carving out a tax credit for a very specific industry with rules that narrow the playing field on who has access to this tremendously. So these are big businesses. They can hire the lobbyists. They can push their policy. I think it's just bad on every level. But also, I think it's a bad bill because of the financial impact of it. You play the math out a little bit. We're asking for $50 million of investment, and we're paying $30 million to get it. So what does the state get? The state gets blue sky, potential return on investment from maybe sales tax, maybe property tax, maybe income tax in the future. I mean, if we really want to get into the game of playing with businesses and picking winners and losers, why don't we just give the Department of Commerce $30 million or $50 million to loan out at zero interest? If we gave the Department of Commerce $50 million to loan out at zero interest, we get all that money back. And we also get the property tax, sales tax, income tax. But this is simply a gift to big business that wants to push a policy through. If we wanted to really do this, we have a Department of Commerce already and we have different programs in the state that offer low interest loans and various mechanisms. Why don't we just get into the business of zero interest loans to businesses? Because at least we get the principal back and we get all of the supposed tax income from the growth. But I think this is just a bad deal. If the state of Kansas, if I have to run it like my personal finance or my personal business, why do I give somebody else the gift? Why don't I take it for myself? I don't understand this. And we do this year after year with various policies. And I think this is just a bad deal philosophically, but also a bad deal financially. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee, is there any further discussion? Representative Helgerson.
Well, I had jotted down a couple of questions, and my learned colleague answered a couple of them, I think, and that was, what's the maximum exposure for the state? Is it 50 million? 30, I'm sorry, okay, 30 million. What's the return on investment? What are the outcomes? What do we expect would be if it's successful, what should we expect? And I guess I have heard the Department of Commerce for the last 40 years coming in with these great programs. I would like them just to say, this is what we expect. This is why we think state dollars should be there. And here's how you're going to measure it. And I have the same problems and concerns with this. You know, we have already leveraged right now ourselves to the point where we don't want to put 50 million more out on or 30 million out on a risky investment that may or may not turn more jobs or more revenue. And so I urge us to not pass this bill and to look at other opportunities.
Further discussion, committee? Seeing none, after that robust discussion, is there a motion on the table? Representative Francis.
I'll make the motion. I do think that we have a problem with credit in rural Kansas. I think it's hard to get appraisals. I think it's hard to make some of these things work. I would like some kind of sunset on it to see what the outcomes are after 4 or 5 years. Is it appropriate to put like the program's set to run right now like 2 years, and then is it 3 years? What would a sunset look like? Would it be more appropriate to be 6 years or 5 years?
If we're going to do something conceptual, I'll defer to the revisor on how he would want to write that into the program.
If you make the 50 million, you've got 2 years, I think, to put it to work, and then you get the tax credits for.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Eddie and I were kind of briefly discussing, since this is more of a comprehensive program versus, income tax credits are easy to sunset, since this is more of a program, probably the best bet would be in section 4 in the certification amounts would be where prohibiting any certification amounts after a certain date might be the appropriate place to place a sunset. So, after not being able to certify amounts after this date, essentially there wouldn't be any more credits issued. Probably be the route that we could go.
Okay, so something like no further certifications. It would go into effect July 1, I guess the way the bill's written right now, July 1 of 26. So I could say something like no further certifications after June 30th of 2031. I'd like to make that motion.
I'm going to look to the revisor to make sure that the motion is clear. So in section 4, we would be adding essentially no further certifications after
Briefly discussing, Eddie brought up a good point. It's probably a better practice to make it either, at the beginning of a calendar year versus, the fiscal year. So a January 1 date is probably more applicable since this whole program runs on a calendar year.
Okay, so January 1 of 2027, and no further certifications after December 31st of 2032? 28, 29, 30,
it'd be
31,
December
32.
31st of 31.
Well,
or
if
January
I start
1st.
January 1, I got 27, 28, 29, 30. Yeah, 31, you're right.
Okay.
Or we could just say this isn't ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Excuse me? Well, someone said it'd be better to do it on a calendar year basis. Right, but they can't even start until July 1.
Again, if summarizing, right now I believe the motion is to essentially start the program January 1 of 2027. So it wouldn't, even though the bill goes into effect, there would be no certifications from January 1 of 27, and then ending any certifications. Did we end up on 20 through, essentially, tax years 27 through 31, if I understand correctly? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so if the motion, the maker of the motion is clear, revisers are clear, we had a second for Representative Wolf. Actually, I had 2 seconds, so we'll have discussion on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. Representative Francis, you may close.
Yeah, I think there's some doubt about this program in some minds, and I'd like to give it a shot and reevaluate it after 5 years. I close.
Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. And we're back on the bill. Any further discussion? Representative Helgerson?
Well, it looks like it's going to pass. I'm just asking all of you right now, how do you judge this to be a success or not in 5 years? Do you know? Maybe that's the biggest question right there. If you can't tell me right now that this will be a successful program, either we'll create so many jobs or we'll make so much money available, the department shouldn't even be coming here and talking about it. Well, I'm definitely against it because I can go back and list the number of programs that we start like this that we don't have really a specific idea of what's going to be successful or not. We may have identified that there's a need, but we don't know how we're going to judge it if we're successful in dumping in more money.
Representative Abercamp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So once again, there's something about economic development in this building. It just seems like it walks through here like it's a god. And it forces us to not look at the math. And I don't understand it. Like if we look at this as if we're running a business, we're in charge of making policies, financial policies for the people of Kansas. And if we looked at it as if it's coming out of our pockets, I think we would look at it completely different. We're essentially giving a gift of $30 million to a bunch of investors to supposedly make a low-interest loan to businesses. What do we get? Maybe taxes in the future. If we have $30 million to blow, why not make a program that offers zero-interest loans to businesses? And then we get the principal back, and we also get our taxes. We lose, in theory, nothing or $30 million for the life of the loan. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. If we didn't have high-powered lobbyists, big businesses pushing these policies, we'd never do them because they don't make sense. We've got to separate ourselves and look at the actual policies, treat it as if it's our own dollars. Stuff like this would never see the light of day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion, committee? Seeing none, is there a motion on House Bill 2541? As amended, is there a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Okay.
We can either put it to bed or we can pass it out, one or the other.
Okay. All right, do we have a second? Second from Representative Hoheisel. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
The noes appear to have it. Do you want division? Yeah. Division's been called. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your hand. On a count of 7 to 12, the motion fails. Okay, after that robust discussion, I do have one more that I'd like to take a look at if we could, please, and that's House Bill 2005. This is a bill that we passed out of committee last year. It was sitting under the line on GO. We had it referred back to committee. some of the proponents that were working on it had worked with the speaker and leadership to try to make some adjustments to this and get the bill passed. So they kicked it back to committee for some amendments. But I'll turn to the reviser if he's ready to give us a quick overview on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2005 would establish what is referred to as the Veterans Valor Property Relief Act. What the bill would do is it would provide for an income tax credit currently commencing in tax year 2025 as the bill is drafted, an amount equal to 75% of the amount of property and ad valorem taxes actually and timely paid by a taxpayer who has been deemed totally disabled, permanently and totally disabled, or unemployable pursuant to Code of Federal Regulations. And if such taxes were paid upon real or personal property used for residential purposes of such taxpayer, which is the taxpayer's principal place of residence for the tax year in which the credit is claimed. This would be a refundable credit. And that the Veterans Valor Property Relief Act would be considered part of the Homestead Property Tax Refund Act, except that the income and appraised valuation limits would not apply.
Okay, Mr. Siebers, I needed to clarify something. Is this the version as it passed out of House Committee last year? Because I thought that was a 50%, not 75. Just wanted to clarify
I
that.
apologize. That is correct. I was reading my explainer before it got amended. You know, it moved back, and the House Committee actually did amend it 75 down to 50%. So sorry about that.
Thank you. Nope, no problem. Just wanted to clarify. Committee, any questions for the reviser? Seeing none, is there any discussion on the bill? Representative Butler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this bill did pass out last year at 50%. We brought it in, it was originally 75. We brought back an amendment, changed to 50. It passed out of the chamber, out of the committee, went to the floor. And further conversation with leadership, we took out another portion of those who are eligible, and that was the part that was totally disabled. So we took out a portion of those that would be able to receive this tax incentive to reduce the overall cost of this. The benefit to this is keeping the people that are disabled in the state of Kansas. We have a mass exodus of military people that are getting out that are disabled. They're going to Texas, Tennessee, Florida, those areas where they have no taxes based on that. We're losing good employees and that we can use. So I'd encourage you to vote for this. I vote for it to reduce it. We've already passed it out. This is just amending it to a little more. So, thank you.
Do you have an amendment? Yeah, I thought you might.
I reckon I better say yes. Mr. Chair, the amendment would read do we have copies of it?
Yes, they'll pass that out.
I got one. Yeah. I think everybody's got one. The amendment it really is a definition of those who are disabled, the service member, and it talks about who the taxpayer is, and then it takes out that portion that said totally disabled, permanently and totally disabled, disabled, unemployable. All it makes it now is 100% permanent and total service-connected disabled and totally disabled unemployable. Because there are people that are 100% that they can still work and they can still go do things, and so that was the question that was brought up by the speaker, and we said we agreed to that, said we understand that. Those also that are disabled, they also go back through reevaluations periodically to evaluate their disability. So this just takes that group out of this group of body that would receive the tax benefit.
Okay, and do we have a second on that? Representative Helgerson for the second on the Butler amendment. Without trying to oversimplify it, Representative, would it be safe to say that this is truly focusing this relief towards those who probably need it the most, the ones that are unable to work?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This would be focused right on those.
Okay, thank you. Representative Corbett, did you have a question?
No, I think I just want to make sure it was 100% the way this amendment reads, right, Representative?
Say, I can't.
So your amendment said that they have to be 100%?
Correct, yes, 100%.
Okay.
Representative Kahar?
Thank you. Just making sure I'm understanding. So this means they would be a veteran who is 100% disabled and unemployable. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Yes, because we do have, and I've learned more about military definitions in the last 2 years than I ever thought I would know, but a veteran can have a 100% disability that is not permanent. A veteran can have a permanent disability that's not 100%. Those groups, if you have 100% disability and it's permanent, that's the ones that this is restricting that to, plus the ones that are totally disabled and unemployable. As I was reading through some definitions and situations, that's somebody who has lost the use of both their eyes, an arm and a leg, or there's some pretty severe, it's strictly for the severe cases, the people that cannot work. So, Representative
We
Butler.
have several of those that are psychological issues that have been blown up multiple times, who are at home and they cannot function in society. So it may not be a loss of a limb or anything else, but it may be something else that's causing that. So,
yes, Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, do you know what this does to the fiscal note, how much it lowers it down to?
I looked at the fiscal note from the last year when 2 years ago when it was at 75%. And back then the fiscal note was 11,400,000 for 26, 12,200,000 for 27. So take another quarter off of that to put it back to the 50%. So we're looking at about 8,500,000. But now you're going to take an additional group off of that. So it would reduce that below that $8 million fund. Our fiscal note.
Okay, I thought the 50%, I think when we lowered it to 50%, we took about 4 million off.
It would have, I think, because originally the fiscal note I have only is at the 75% rate. Okay. So that's why I took about 4 million off of that. And then now you're going to take an additional fund off of that based on the number. I don't have the exact number of what that would be.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and I had asked that question too when we were discussing this bill. I don't think we have the exact data on exactly who all would be. If we do it, all that's 100% disabled and above, we had some data on that one. That's how we got that fiscal note. But I think they were roughly estimating, and this isn't an official fiscal note, but I think they were estimating it would reduce it by another $3 or $4 million. But that's pure speculation. They weren't going to put that in a fiscal note because they didn't have the data to estimate that. But Representative Kahar.
Sorry, I'm reading this, and it looks like, because I'm supportive of if it's 100% disabled and unemployable, but it looks like it crosses all of that out and it just says by a taxpayer. Is it somewhere else?
On the back page is where it defines the balloon on the back page is where it defines taxpayer as.
Thank you.
Okay, yep.
So we did just to verify this and make sure where we were staying on it. I did communicate with the Kansas Veterans Office to verify with them what they thought about this, and they agreed, and they actually made sure the writing and the verbiage was correct on this one.
That's another thing I've learned about the military references is you have to reference the right U.S. codes and all of the different sections. There's a lot to learn on that. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Kahar.
Last one, I promise. This says that it's to be 100% permanent and total service-connected disability or a total disability rating based on unemployability. Did we mean it to be and unemployable? Because it seems like it would include the people, and correct me if I'm wrong because you're more familiar with the veteran terminology. There are people who can have 100% disability but still work and earn over $100,000 a year. And so is it including those or not?
Mr. Chair. So this would be the 100% permanent, totally disabled or unemployable. So there may be some that are unemployable that they may be less than that, but they're completely unemployable. That's the way I understand it. So it's going to keep them in that. That's the way I understand it. I'm not 100%. I have to find out to make sure if there's another wording on it. I think that's what you're asking me.
As I was visiting with the representatives on this bill, the underlying bill before this amendment was proposed included 3 groups. First group was 100% disabled. The second group was 100% permanent and totally disabled. The third group, and Representative, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it is possible to have less than 100%, but have that disability be permanently or unemployable. I think TDIU is the acronym they use. It's totally disabled and individually unemployable. So that's the 3 different groups that we were addressing in the original bill, and we have simply removed those that are 100% disabled, but they're still able to work and earn an income. So we're just trying to focus it on the 2 groups that are truly disabled and probably need this relief the most because they cannot work.
Then should it say and unemployable?
No, you've got 2 different spots here. The first group is permanent and total. The 100% permanent and total, that's one group. You have to be 100% permanent, or you have to be both. And then second group, because those don't cross over, is totally disabled and unemployable. Clear as mud. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you say they don't overlap, so those are unique classes?
Yes, because that second class, if you underline total disability rating based on unemployability, that can be less than 100%. You could have a veteran that was maybe considered 70 or 80% disabled, but that disability was so severe that they are unemployable. It's a total disability, even though it's not 100%.
It's a big formulary that they use. And so you get so many points, so much percentage for this, so much percentage for this, so much percentage for this, and then they combine it all together, and it doesn't equal 100%. It could be multiple, more than that, but then they got a formula that goes back in and figures out that percentage. You could still be completely unemployable, but less than 100%.
Can I ask?
Yes, Representative Turner.
So based on, as you said, based on that formulary, but at the end of that, can they walk out and go back to their job?
No. So they're unemployable. Now, so the ones before that, the 100% disabled, the first group that we took out, they can work full time.
Yeah, the formula might qualify them as 100% disabled, but they are still able to work. I know we can really get into the weeds here, but I guess I would just ask, we had representatives from the Kansas Office of Veteran Services, proponents of this bill that have worked on this language, that they do this for a living. So at some point I try to understand it, but at some point I just have to trust them. And this was the language that they had suggested. So any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative, you can close on your amendment.
I close.
Okay. Committee, you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. I do have another amendment I would like to propose on this while the revisor is handing that out. Just in the interest of time, I'll explain it. It's a very simple amendment, nothing really to read once you get the paper. Back in 2024, we passed CCR for House Bill 2098. That implemented a disabled veterans sales tax exemption. The bill had been heard in the Senate. It had never been worked in committee. It never ran across the floor. We never saw the bill. It was adopted as part of the conference committee. I've had a little bit of buyer's remorse over that because as I've studied, it was based on the Oklahoma model for a disabled veteran sales tax exemption they have down there. The more research I did, this is what I found. There's been significant problems with retailers accepting these exemption cards. Essentially, your veterans get a card issued from the Department of Revenue that qualifies them for that exemption. They take that to retailers, convenience store, grocery store, Home Depot, wherever they go shopping. They present this to the retailer and are qualified for this exemption. It is a limited exemption, though. It isn't a full exemption. They only get $24,000 worth of maximum purchases. They had some problems with the retailers accepting this. If you know the normal process, retailers, you have to fill out a form to receive your sales tax exemption. They keep that form on file. So since this didn't follow that process, Oklahoma had a lot of problems with retailers accepting this, to the point where they had to introduce a new law that implemented a $500 fine and made it a misdemeanor criminal offense if you refuse this card. Guess what happened? There was a lot of fraudulent use after that. One article I found, there was an Oklahoma newspaper out of 2021 that found 16,000 people were using these cards fraudulently. And I want to make it clear, these are not veterans that are using these cards fraudulently. These are people that are creating fake cards. They are stealing the cards and using them, which is absolutely despicable in to be impersonate a veteran and try to receive benefits on their behalf when you haven't earned it. They adopted new cards later with a new program that had higher security levels, but the vets had to re-register for those cards. The old cards were rejected. There was lawsuits, and I just thought, we tried to do something good for the veterans, but we have created an extremely complicated process for them to receive a small benefit. So last year I was trying to toy around with this idea because I didn't want to repeal something that we had given them without coming up with a replacement. I've worked through several different ideas with the Office of Veteran Services, with Department of Revenue. I've had some really bad ideas, and I thank them for correcting me on not making a bad program even worse. But when the speaker gave permission to allow the Veterans Valor Program to come through, this touches the exact same veteran group. House Bill 2005 touches that exact same group that qualified for that sales tax exemption. I'll be honest, there might be some veterans that get more of a benefit from the sales tax exemption than they would from the property tax income tax credit. There might be some that get a better benefit from the property income tax credit than they did the sales tax exemption. I know when we did the sales tax exemption, that was before food was at zero, and that was the basis for a lot of the reasoning on that. But essentially my amendment is going to repeal that program, and the reason I'm adding it to this bill rather than running it separately is I want to make sure if this bill goes through, we have a program that replaces it. I don't want to propose repealing the sales tax exemption unless I'm guaranteed that another program that's just as good, hopefully better, by providing some property tax relief through an income tax credit to these veterans. But that's my proposal. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember a few years ago when we were having this discussion, and the card was kind of an issue as a topic of conversation, figuring out. Can you give me one more time the actual underlying bill number in 2024?
The conference committee report was on House Bill 2098.
But the underlying bill was it that the underlying bill, the original proposal, not the CCR?
The original proposal was Senate Bill 58.
58, gotcha.
That was introduced in the Senate. They heard it in Senate, but it never made it through committee or across the floor.
Yeah, that's what I need. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll second for your amendment.
Okay, we have a second from Representative Hoheisel. Representative Corbett?
Just a question. We kind of heard the physical note on the other bill, on the property tax. This looks like it could be even higher. Do you have any idea what the note would be and how many people this might affect? I don't know.
I don't, because we would have to know what properties veterans owned in order to know how this property tax credit, let's say your property tax bill is $3,000. The Veterans Valor Program allows a 50% credit, so you could have up to like a $1,500 benefit. If you are buying $20,000 worth of retail goods, let's say your exemption wherever you do your shopping, it's not just the state, it's all of your sales tax. So if your sales tax rate is 8% between the state and your local sales tax, that'd be $1,600. So we just don't have the data to really say what it is, but it's the exact same group that's receiving these benefits between the two. And I would hope that a property tax, 50% property tax relief would be sufficient to cover what the benefit would have been under the sales tax exemption. Representative Helgerson?
Trying to understand how this would work. So an individual will have a card. They get 50% reduction. Is that correct?
They get an income tax credit up to 50% of their property tax bill.
They file at the end of the year?
When you do your income taxes is when you go through all your income tax credits.
Okay.
So you would qualify for whatever you've paid on your property taxes, up to 50% coming back to you on your income taxes as a refundable tax credit.
And since we had such lengthy discussion previously, does the 100% disabled residents who have been honorably discharged from the armed forces, does that fit with all the armed force groups?
Yes. I'm not sure I understand the question.
We got into a lot of discussion about different individuals qualified for the exemptions previously and others did not. I assume somebody ran it by the veterans groups.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Representative Howerton and then Long.
Just to clarify, so you are repealing this, and you're repealing what is on the back page?
Yeah, I guess I should have turned to the reviser to explain what the amendment.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, essentially the back page is just the current statute. And so just without any sort of, comprehension of what the statute is, the bill itself will look like the first page because all we're doing is a straight repeal. We're not sunsetting. It'll just disappear off the books. So to be able to see what you're actually repealing, I included on the back page, which is the current statute. But assuming the amendment gets on and the bill gets passed, that will essentially be wiped from the books.
Perfect, thank you.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in a very limited amount of cases, there may be a few veterans renting and not taking advantage of the property tax. But now we're also taking the sales tax exemption away. Is that?
That could be possible, yes.
I don't know how many that would cover, but that's what this would do that. Yeah.
Representative Turner.
So it's going to give them up to 50% of the property taxes paid. So if those were paid to the county and the city, then we're going to give them a credit on their state income tax. So those taxing entities still get their money. It's just that the credit comes from the state.
Yes, they actually pay their full property tax bill, but then when they file their income taxes, if the example I used, if they had paid $3,000 of property tax, they could qualify for up to a $1,500 refundable income tax credit. Yeah, and the reason we had to make that refundable in the underlying bill is because a lot of these folks that are truly disabled and can't work, their only income is disability, which is not taxable. So if you don't make that refundable, a lot of them wouldn't qualify for any of this because they just don't have the tax liability.
You need a motion?
Yes, Representative Corbett.
I make a motion that House Bill 20005.
Oh,
be
wait a
passed.
minute.
No.
I apologize. We need to close on the amendment first.
Okay.
Right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I make a motion that House Bill 2005 be passed out as amended.
Second from Representative Sawyer. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Oh, wait a minute. Representative Awerkamp, did you have a bill introduction you needed taken care of? I forgot about that. I apologize.
Be quick, Mr. Chairman, but yeah, yes, please. I've got RS 3958, and that is a bill to ratchet down the 20 mills, 1 mill per year, and stop at 15. And then RS 3959, and I apologize if I took an idea maybe from you, is to ratchet down the 20 mills, 1 mill to 19, and then use R&R to lower the mill each year in order to keep the revenue neutral. The increase in assessed valuation drives down the mill and have it stop at 15.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions or objections? Seeing none, the requests are approved. Now, we're adjourned.